Hey guys, Test Drive here. It's been a little while since I've seen everyone on this channel, but I've been pretty busy and I thought I'd just wait until the big expansion hit for Hearthstone before I started putting up content again. I'm pretty excited. I've got a lot of great deck ideas for the upcoming expansion. And this is my card review for the new expansion for Hearthstone. So this format will be that you're going to see the ratings of the community at large on this particular website below each card. So that'll give you a little extra frame of reference of kind of where the community sees a given card. And I'm not going to be using those numbers. I'll be using, my personal thoughts, which won't always line up with what the community thinks, but nonetheless, this is kind of these are the numbers that I think. So, of course, 1 star being the worst, 5 star being the best. That's the rating that I'll be using. 1 star cards will really not be seen at all. 2 star cards will, probably be tried out in some early deck testing. It maybe has some niche or quirk that seems interesting, but ultimately will not be useful. A 3-star card is a solid card that can be found in decks. It won't be the best card in the deck, but it won't be the reason that the deck loses, and it'll find its way into, it's a pretty average card for most decks. A 4-star card's a really important card for a given deck. It means that the mechanics that it's using or the design of the card is really strong, but it's not an auto include. It's not the very cream of the crop of that particular type of idea that card is giving. And a 5-star card is you've got to have these in that particular type of deck. You really wouldn't run that type of deck without that card. One last thing to mention is my rating system is going to be based on how good that card would be for the intended deck that the design is to. It's not necessarily going to reflect that a given archetype is not going to be good in the meta. My card review is going to reflect how good a card would be in the deck that it's intended to be in. Okay, so let's go ahead and get right into it. We're going to be starting with the Druid class, and our first card is the Witchwood Apple. I'm not going to read off what each card does. I'll just give you my thoughts on them. I do believe that Witchwood Apple is going to be a 4-star card, and it's going to be the most important part to making a hand druid a thing. I think Hand Druid is going to be a welcome new addition to Hearthstone, and running a lot along the way that Hand Lock works, where you're filling up your hand, but since Druid doesn't really have a card draw mechanic so much with the hero power, Druid is going to be using cards like Witchwood Apple to add extra cards into his hand, and then he's going to use that to power up things like his Mountain Giants and Twilight Drakes and those kind of things. I think it's going to work out well for Druid, and I think that's going to be a 4-star card. The effect itself is not very exciting, but I think the real value here is getting 3 cards into your hand. It should be noted that you're only adding 2 cards to your hand, not 3, because the card itself is going to be cast when you play it. But still, adding 2 cards to your hand is going to be very, very good for Hand Druid. The next card is Witching Hour. I believe that this card is going to be a 4-star card. This card I think is going to really come and play with some excellent beasts that this Druid has coming to it now. And it may seem a little slow in the beginning, but what's going to happen is you're going to find that you're only running the cream of the crop beasts in these Hand Druid decks, and when you get a 3/12, one of the minions that's in this set is a 3/12 taunt, and when you summon him out again, it's going to be just very impactful, and it'll be easy to set your deck up to only be working with the cream of the crop beast. So I do think that Witching Hour is going to be a really strong 4-star card. Druid of the Scythe. I think that this card is going to be a 4-star card as well. It doesn't seem particularly impressive as far as, oh wow, that rating sounds a little bit too high at first glance. But if you consider that for 3 mana you get a 4/2 rush or a 2/4 taunt, it's just very versatile, and I think that it's going to turn out to really just be a valuable, flexible card, and I think you'll find that that's going to be used quite a bit. Ferocious Howl I have as a 3-star card. This one reminds me a lot of Shield Block for Warrior. Shield Block is a 5 armor draw card for 3 mana. This card will probably average just about that number. On the lower end, yeah, sometimes you'll miss a couple points of armor depending on what your hand size is. But actually, because you're working with the hand druid archetype, I think more often than not you're going to get closer to like 8 armor out of this card. In either case, it's strong enough in a control style class or control style deck to run, and the shield block at 5 armor draw a card was good enough for a control warrior. I think this will work out pretty well for hand druid. Not the best card, not the most pressing card for the deck, but I think it'll be a solid 3-drop for that class. Okay, the next card we have is Whispering Woods. Whispering Woods, I'm not too excited about. I think that this is going to be a 2-star card. It's not completely useless, but it's also not something that I'm too excited about. I just don't think you're going to have much need for a 4-mana fill your board with 1/1s. I'd much rather, in a hand druid style deck, use Twilight Drakes and Mountain Giants and even another rare that's coming out in this expansion, which we'll get to at the 5-mana slot. But I just don't think Whispering Woods is going to be very good. I think it's going to be a 2-star card. Forest Guide, I don't think this is going to be a good card at all. I think this is going to be a 2-star card. I get that they're trying to work with the hand druid archetype, but I just don't think at the end of the day that it's going to take off, because you're giving your opponent the first draw. It's very weak stats. You're paying quite a lot of mana for that. I'd much rather have a Cold Light Oracle, draw 2 cards, but that's rotating out with this expansion. So I don't think Forest Guide will prove to be worth it for the weak stats that it brings. Gloomstag, I'm actually really high on. I've got this as a 4-star card. 5 mana for what should usually be, well, what will always be a 4/8, because you'll only run it in your odd druid deck, is just, I think, excellent value for those stats. You used to get Druid of the Claw play for 5 mana for a 4/6 taunt, and you always wanted to take the 4/6 version as much as possible. This one's going to come in with 2 extra health. There's really nothing else that rivals a 5 mana 4/8 if you're looking for some kind of taunt at 5 mana. So it's a very unique card insofar as the stats it gives you are pretty hard to find anywhere else, and you won't find another 5 mana 4/8 taunt anywhere else. So the Gloomstag and an odd druid would be the way to go, and I do think it's going to end up being a 4-star card. Duskfallen Aviana was a real heartbreak when I saw it revealed. I like the art. I think it's a cool looking card. I like the idea of it playing off of the Aviana that we've already seen before in this class as a legendary, but the effect is just really bad. You're most likely going to not find a way to work around and give shenanigans to get the proc off without your opponent first getting the proc. And if your opponent gets the proc, they're just going to generally kill this with their highest ability card, and you probably won't be able to get back to it on your turn. Things like Q block or like cubing this, it just isn't going to work. No matter how you're going about comboing this, the turn you play it, you're going to have to play some kind of combo card, and that's going to mean that you won't be able to get this effect on your turn, and your opponent will get the effect before you'll have a chance to use it. So I'm not very high on that legendary for Druid. Now we get to Bewitched Guardian. This card I think is going to be a real strong card for Hand Druid. I am really looking forward to working this one in the new expansion. So I've got this as a 4-star card. Obviously it's like a Twilight Drake, but it doesn't fight with Twilight Drake at the 4 slot. I really think that's going to be an underrated value of this card, just the fact that it doesn't come in the 4 slot where Mountain Giants and Twilight Drakes want to be played, and yet it still works with all of the concepts you're trying to do in a hand lock type deck. At 1 more mana will just clear up your turn 4 a little bit and give you a better turn 5 play. You know, the classic Warlock deck that used Twilight Drakes also tried to taunt them and taunt the Mountain Giants, and this one has the taunt built right in. So I really expect good things out of this. I think on turn 5, oftentimes you're going to be pulling out something like a 4/8, maybe a 4/9 with taunt for 5 mana. So, you know, we had just talked before about how you really can't find another 4/8 when I said Gloomstag, and that's still true as far as you can't have a guaranteed 4/8, and there will be times when you can't get your Bewitched Guardian quite up to that 4/8 slot because that's a lot of cards. But I think more often than not in this archetype you will have the ability to get that off as a 4/8, 4/9 even, possibly. And we get to Splintergraft. I don't know if I gave you the stars, but I think Bewitched Guardian is a 4-star card. Finally, we have Splintergraft. I think this is a 4-star card. I'm very high on this card. I know that not everyone is. I know a lot of people look at the 10 cost issues and don't see it, but what I see in this card is, you know, you're going to be playing this in a control druid deck, and when you choose a 10/10 copy of a friendly minion, kind of like the Zola the Gorgon battle cry, I think you're going to just have a lot of versatility. You're going to now have, no matter what the effect is on that minion that you chose, you're going to have a 10/10 version of it. It will cost you 10, but you're going to have some real possibilities to do some really fun things just depending on the card that you're selecting. I think it's got great versatility. I think the 10/10 stats at the 10 mana slot is going to work out really well. You know, Druid has the ability to ramp out and can get access to these stats a lot earlier than a lot of classes, so I think that he'll be able to work around it. And this one comes in at 8. It doesn't come in at turn 10, so it's not the same imperative that, you know, you would have if he was 10 mana or something to make sure he does something immediately. I think this is going to be quite a good card, and I think the combos that people will have for it are really going to be interesting to see. So that is the Druid class, and let's go ahead and move on over to the Hunter class. We start with Hunting Mastiff. I do not think this is a very good card. I think this is a 2-star card. I know that the Echo and Rush is going to be helpful at times, and I do give an extra star in general in my ratings to Echo class cards. The only thing is this already has such a strong competitor in Unleash the Hounds. At 3 mana, you can get a bunch of 1/1s with charge that can take care of much of the same that this Hunting Mastiff would do. And you're going to pay so much mana for each iteration of this one that I don't think that this is going to be the kind of card that will give the power that you're going to need in general. It is Echo, so there's some potential combos that work well with any Echo card. You know, different things that playing a minion will proc or playing a spell will proc, and those will be really good combos. But for this particular Echo card, I see this as a 2-star card. We go over to Rat Trap, and Rat Trap is just really bad. I think Rat Trap is a 1-star card. You know, it's going to be so easy to play around this. It's going to take three turns or 3 cards being played by your opponent. Opponents are generally just going to play 2. It's not that hard to just play 2 anyways, and once you play a secret, they'll just play 2 and work around it, and you'll never get your 6/6 rat. Next up is the Duskhaven Hunter for 3. I think that this card is a really bad card. I think this is a 1-star card. I just don't see where this is going to be very helpful. You know, there would be some more potential if it was a 5/2 with straight up stealth for 3. Maybe I'd be a little bit more interested in it. But you've got to wait until, you know, until this is a 5/2 before you can actually play it the way that you want it. And because of that, I just, you know, the timing won't always be there. And a 5/2 is not really that good anyway. We've had a 5/1 with stealth before in Hearthstone. In Rogue had that, and it was never played. 5/2 is a little better because it's a little more resilient to AoE, but this will be 2/5 when you first draw it. You won't want to use it that way, and then you've got to be ready to play it the next turn. I just don't think this is going to work. So here you see the actual Duskhaven card, and then this is the token that it generates. Next up, we do have Houndmaster Shaw. I have this as a 5-star card. I think this is going to be excellent. You know, seeing a Tundra Rhino on your opponent's board always signals you to do whatever you can to take it off the board. Houndmaster Shaw comes in earlier. It's even more resilient with the 6 health instead of the 5. It even hits harder with the 3 versus the 2. And this is actually going to give rush to all of your minions, not just your beasts. I know that Hunter generally is looking to put beasts in their deck, but there are very valuable minions that you want to put in there too that are not always beasts. So Houndmaster Shaw is just amazing. It's doing everything that Tundra Rhino is doing, but better. And I have a lot of respect for Tundra Rhino as a card and find it as a real game changer. So Houndmaster Shaw is going to do excellent. Particularly in a Death Knight Rexar deck, you're going to be able to get all those zombies played with your Houndmaster Shaw. So right into play with rush effects. That's going to be amazing. So I have this as a 5-star card. Toxmonger is a 4 mana card, but I have this as a where did it go? It's a 2-star card. I don't think that the 1-cost minion synergy is going to be strong enough to have a bunch of 1-cost cards in your deck that's going to make your deck weaker. Having Poisonous is suggesting it wants to be a control style deck, and if you're playing a control style deck, you can do better than 1-cost cards, 1-cost minions. So I just don't think that this is going to ultimately be a very good card. Wing Blast I have as a 4-star card. I would be tempted to make this a 5-star card. It's really, really good. It is, you know, the reason it's not quite a 5-star card is there's going to be times when it's going to be a 4 mana 4 damage card, and that's just not good enough. But most times it's going to be really easy to proc this, and you're going to get this for 1 cost. So a 1-cost 4 damage card to minions is great removal, and I'm very excited about that one. The next card, Dire Frenzy. Now this one I can't really say is going to be the sleeper of the set because I think a lot of people have high expectations for it. But yeah, definitely I think this is a great card. I think it's a 5-star card. Just this different synergies that you can imagine using with this deck or with this card are just out of this world. I'm not going to necessarily even be able to list all the different ideas, but even if we looked at a card which I didn't like from the beginning of this, of Hunting Mastiff with Echo and Rush, you know, you play Echo on this beast. The first time you play it, yes, it's going to be buffed by Dire Frenzy, let's say, and that first copy won't really be able to continue to pour through your hand. But once you draw the next 3 copies, those copies I expect are going to just be amazing Echo cards. So that's one combo, and there's just many, many cool combos you can work with this. There's taunt minions, there's different lifesteal type minions or rush minions. Just the strength of having 3 more shuffled into your deck that are now all +3/+3s, while still giving you almost a Blessing of Kings for the same amount of mana on the original beast is going to be excellent. So I think he is a 5-star card. Next up, we do have Carrion Drake, and this I have as a 4-star card. You know, this one is almost always going to be able to be procced as a 3/7 poisonous for 5, and I think a 3/7 poisonous for 5 is going to be excellent. 7 health is really hard to get rid of via minion trade damage, and having the poisonous is, of course, is going to take care of everyone that's trying to deal with him. I think he's going to 2 or 3 for 1 most situations that he comes into. Yes, there's times when he won't proc his poisonous on 5, but you'll still just wait until a turn when you can proc his poisonous and just play him maybe on turn 6 in that case. But for the most part, you're going to have a 3/7 poisonous for 5, and I think that's really strong in a control style deck. So I have it as a 4-star card. The Vilebrood Skitterer, I have a 2-star card. I think the mana is way too high. Yes, the effect is nice to be able to destroy something, but his health is also very low for the fact that his attack is very weak. You know, he's just, the stats are way too low for this, even though the combination of poisonous and rush is awesome. The cost that they put on it is way too high. He has a little bit of potential, which is why he's a 2-star, not a 1-star, insofar as he's still removal, and there's a potential that he could be what you need for removal, as opposed to some other minions that are just stats and won't do anything whatsoever for you. But I have Vilebrood Skitter as a 2-star card. And finally, in the Hunter class, we have Emerus. You know, Emerus is super, super, super slow. And as a result, there's not a whole lot of expectation that you're going to be able to get this card to proc very well. At first glance, I thought this was going to be a much lower star card, but you know, I think there's really some potential for Control Hunter to become a thing with the cards that they got in this expansion pack, plus a few of the cards they got in the last, you know, that's currently in standard, like the Death Star, the Death Knight Rexar. So I think there's some potential, because as you get to a control situation, then he's going to, of course, once he hits the board, if he can survive and you get a turn or 2 off with him, then, and he's going to make the, he's going to pretty much secure your win if he's not going to get you killed the turn he gets played. But overall, the pros and cons are that he doesn't impact the board when it comes in, and you still need to play the other cards that he's buffing in order to have the impact, and you might just die by then. So that's a very low rated card on that end. But the potential is certainly there for him to be your sole win condition, and that's worth some consideration too. So all things considered, I believe Emerus will find some play in longer style control hunters. But ultimately, I think he's going to be a 2-star card, because Tyrannus was a really good 10 mana card for Druid, and at 12/12 can't be targeted. That was a good win condition, but you really couldn't get it into play because of how high the mana cost was, and the fact that he didn't impact the board the turn he came out. So that's really the death knell, I think, for poor Emerus. So that's a 2-star card. Next up, we have Mage. We start with Book of Specters. This card is really interesting because Book of Specters just does not work well with the classic Mage archetype. Classic Mage runs a lot of spells and has some of the best spell removal types and card draws and just a lot of really good spells. In this case, you are going to be penalized for running spells, and so you really want to run this in a minion-style deck. Thankfully for Mage, they're getting a lot of minion tools in this expansion, so I can see this possibly working simply because I can see a minion Mage deck working, such as Elemental Mage or, you know, basically Elemental Mage or some kind of minion Mage. Including Odd Mage, looks really interesting. They've got a lot of strong tools. So the 3 cards for 2 mana is, of course, absolutely bonkers. That's the steal of the lifetime if you can work around it. And I do think that there's a new archetype that will allow that to happen. So I think that this book is a 3-star card. Next up, we have Archmage Arugal, and Archmage Arugal is a 4-star card. It's almost a 5-star card. I can definitely see the potential how this is just going to, um, just be out of control in some situations. The only problem is you can't control the draws. So, except for the combo of, let's say, a minion mage and running Book of Specters along with the Archmage, that'll be outstanding. And yes, you'll get a lot of cards. I think in a situation like that, you're oftentimes going to overdraw yourself. So that won't always be the best thing. If you're running Book of Specters and Archmage, I'd rather almost just get the 3 cards without the Archmage proc. So I'm not so sure that that's the best combo in the world, because I think you're going to mill yourself. But on the other hand, if you're not working out some kind of draw or minion manipulation, then you're really looking at randomly, are you going to draw that turn? He's not going to live oftentimes until your next turn for you to be able to just keep drawing minions in a regular next turn draw. So you've got to combo him with some kind of draw the turn that you play him. And that's kind of where the problem comes in, is, you've just got to get a lot done on the turn that you play him. And the draws have to end up being minions, which they may not be. And you need to make sure to, get all this done with, 2 mana already being used up. So great effect. If it procs, it's going to be amazing, but he's not going to be the easiest thing to do. But nonetheless, on the turn he's played, he's going to be super, super strong. So he's a 4-star card in my opinion. So next up we have Snap Freeze. This card is really hard for me to judge. Obviously Shatter was horrible, a 1-star card, nobody played it whatsoever. But the fact that the Snap Freeze actually can additionally freeze a minion, that means that if you draw 2 of these in your hand, then you can use the 2 to destroy any minion. It also means that you have some flexibility to freeze a minion that you need to, just to stop them from killing you, even if you can't destroy it right away. But the thing that I like about it the most is Death Knight. The Death Knight mage can utilize this with the water elemental spam that she can get to. You start getting water elementals, and then they freeze a target, and you can snap freeze to destroy it. So it has enough versatility in the early game or the late game that I think it could be useful. It's not the best card to just be depending on. So I kind of see this as a 3-star card. It's got situations that's going to have very high highs. It's got situations where it's not going to really be the star of your deck, but you will still be able to use the versatility to keep yourself alive or accomplish various things that you need to accomplish. The Black Cat definitely would be a 5-star card if it was just printed vanilla as 3/3 spell damage +1 and battle cry draw a card, and that would just be a bonkers card. Probably would be the best card in the entire game. Compares very well to Azure Drake, which of course rotated out because it was too strong at 5 mana for a 4/4 with the spell damage +1 and draw a card. So this would definitely be a 5-star card, except that this can only be played in odd card decks. And I do have a general rule with the even and odd cards that I take a star off, because they're just going to be situations where it's going to be hard to curve stone. There's going to be powerful cards that you're going to have to leave out of your deck because they're not in the even or the odd format that you need. So there's a little bit of inherent weakness in any even odd deck. Nonetheless, this, what would have been a 5-star card, is very, very strong and is going to make your odd mage a very, very potent deck. So I have this as a 4-star card. Next up we have Cinder Storm. It's a 3-mana card. I have this as a 2-star card. It's somewhere in between Arcane Missiles and what was the other one? Not Frost Bolt, but somewhere between Arcane Missiles and what did I have that as? Huh. I can't find what it was, but you know, for 1 mana, you would get 3 damage on the Arcane Missiles. This, I do like the 5 that gives you 5 damage, but the fact that it hits face gives it the same inconsistency that Arcane Missiles had, and at 3 mana instead of 1, it's just too much mana to pay. So I do have this as a 2-star card because there is some use to it. Arcane Missiles had usefulness with certain combos, and this also would as well, but Arcane Missiles was never a great card because of the fact that it hit face as well and could randomly just throw any chance you had it, really clearing the opponent's board. Side note, this being an odd card, it may be a good substitute in a pinch when you can't use Frostbolt because it's a 2-mana card if you're playing an odd mage or something along those lines. So Cinder Storm 2-star card. Vex Crow, I also have as a 2-star card. It's the effect is pretty good with the 2-cost minions as opposed to 1/1s that you would get from Violet, not Violet Oppressives. Oh goodness, I'm blanking on the name right now. But Vex Crow has a much stronger effect than bringing in 1/1s. The problem here is that it's a 3/3, so you're really probably never going to have it stick around. Whereas the other card that everyone knows, I'm just forgetting, the 4-mana 3/5 summon a 1/1 every time you cast a spell. That card had a decent chance at sticking around a turn and being a part of an ongoing combo. This 3 health Vex Crow doesn't have the same strength, so I just don't think it'll be quite that strong, and I have this as a 2-star card. Arcane Keysmith. This one I think is going to be pretty good. It's not amazing, but it's not horrible either. It's a 3-star card for me. You might say, why wouldn't you just play the secret? Well, the thing is, you're getting the secret plus you're getting the 2/2 body. And in Hearthstone, you find that a lot of cards that you get to combine 2 different cards in one card are really, really good. This one is going to give you a chance to get a 3rd copy of a crucial secret if you wanted to have, let's say, 3 counter spells in your deck or something along those lines, while still giving you the 2/2 body. So I think that that's going to prove to be strong enough to be a solid card. If Secret Mage is still a thing, I think she'll run this. But I wouldn't even say Secret Mage only. I could see this run in a variety of mage decks. So yeah, having 2 different cards in one is very, very good. But at the same time, let's not get overboard because it's only a 2/2 for 4 mana, and you may not necessarily discover a useful secret when you play it. So I think a 3-star solid card there. The Bonfire Elemental, I think, is pretty interesting card. I have this as a 4-star card. Elemental synergies are not always the easiest thing, but generally you can make your elementals string together enough to get them reliably to battle cry the way you want them to. I'd say 80% of the time you can get them to do what you need them to do. In this case, a 5/5 and draw a card is an amazing card. That's basically taking the Azure Drake that we talked about earlier and giving them +1/+1 stats. That's a very solid body and still getting the draw card. Azure Drake was never really depended on for the spell damage, by the way. It was really just the combination of raw stats and the draw card that really made it good. And this is a better Azure Drake in that way, as long as you can get the elemental to proc. Additionally, I think this particular expansion has some pretty interesting tools that it can use to help you with your elemental synergy, even despite the fact that some elementals are rotating out. I think this is a good card, not the best card, not a 5-star card, but a solid 4 card. Curio Collector is not a very good card in my opinion. I have this as a 2-star card. It's just it grows slowly in general unless you're like really doubling down on your turn. But on your turn, you don't really want to sink like 8, 9, or 10 mana into a card that's just a bunch of stats, and that's going to get you killed in most cases because you won't be able to make the minion stick. It won't be having an impact on the board. I think the health stat the health stat. I think the buff stats are not high enough to make this card really worth it. At 5 mana 4/4, you've really got to proc this twice before it would just be something that you would just include for the stats alone. And since there's no other effects here, I think the card drawing aspect is not going to grow it fast enough to make it worthwhile. So Curio Collector, I think, is a 2-star card. Finally, we have Toki Time Tinkerer. And this card, I love the theme. I love the flavor. I think it's a very fun card. I like the uniqueness of it. Adding a random legendary from the past, referring to wild cards instead of standard format. We're talking about wild format legendaries. It's just a really interesting mechanic. But the problem is it's not useful. You know, you're going to battle cry. You're not going to discover this card. I think they should have at least let you discover it. So battle cry means it's just going to be purely random. It's a legendary from wild, and that could be anything. You're just as likely to get a really bad legendary as you are to get a really good legendary. So it's just not going to be consistent. And then the stats are weak for a 6 mana card. I think this is a real wasted opportunity, but I'm glad that I'm glad to see this design because it really is an interesting potential way to go forward, and I like to see them thinking outside of the box like that. Unfortunately for Toki, this is a 1-star card in my opinion. I do not think that this could really be played for any real effect. I just think that it's an interesting and fun card, but it doesn't work well enough. So that is Toki Time Tinkerer, and that is the Mage class. Now we're on to my favorite class, which is Paladin. I really, of course, many of you have seen my other Paladin decks, and that's the deck and the class that I like the most. This is the first class that I really took the time to try to collect as many of the cards as possible. The first class that I was able to get all the legendaries for. I think it's a very fun class. I don't really do aggro paladin. I really like the control mage paladin. Of course, if you've watched my other videos, you know how much I like Lanessa. Lanessa paladin with Zola, and just pulling off that 10 mana Lanessa into Zola combo is very satisfying. So good news here is I think there's more tools for Paladin in the mid to control style decks than there are for the aggro decks, and so I'm really excited to see, to play with some of these new toys we've been given. So let's go ahead and get started with Hidden Wisdom. This card is a 1-star card for me. I don't expect very much out of this card. Unfortunately, it's it's just like the Hunter secret, where it's going to be so easy to play around. They just won't play 3 cards in their own turn. Even at that, if you got this to proc, I'm not always happy to draw 2 cards. If I'm playing a Paladin deck that's getting towards the end of the getting towards fatigue, I may not want them to be proccing this. And it's just the kind of card where if they don't want to proc it, they won't proc it, and you won't get it procced early for the most part anyways. So the time when you would start drawing 2 cards would be late in the game, and you probably don't need 2 cards super late in the game. And if it gets really late in the game, then you're probably specifically wanting to limit your draw so you don't risk fatigue. I just don't think this card was designed well enough for what it's doing. The next card, Rebuke, is a really fun blast from the past. Everybody loved Lotheb when he was out of the 5 mana, 5/5. Enemy spells cost 5 more next turn. That was great. Now, this one loses the 5/5 body, and it's not going to be as strong as Lotheb because of that. However, I'm glad they kept the cost relatively low. 2 mana for this effect is strong enough to make it worthwhile. Oftentimes you might set up your board and then be able to rebuke so that they're not going to be able to do much against something big you just put out. I love that this works right along Tyrion, your Tyrion turn, where you could play Tyrion for 6. Play Tyrion for 8. And then follow that up with Rebuke to protect your Tyrion. I think that's great. I also like the fact that you can double this up. Like if you know that you have guaranteed lethal next turn, and you just need them to not be able to spell clear the board, you can play double rebuke and guarantee that they won't be able to do anything. Usually one rebuke is enough to keep your board position guaranteed, but you can also play two of these the same turn. I think this card is going to be a wonderful addition for Control Paladin. The only problem I see is that it's going to be hard to run two of these in your deck, only because the hand mulligan could be so brutal. It will probably auto lose you some games if you draw both your rebukes in your opening mulligan and you can't swap out of them. So more often than not, you're probably going to want to run one rebuke, or at least if you run two, you need to know that you're risking a pretty bad opening if you draw them early. Sound the Bells is an echo card giving +1/+2 to your minions. I think this card is really a good card. I realize that it has the same problem that a lot of echo cards have, that it's not relatively strong enough for the mana you're paying. But this card, I think, when we're talking about being able to spread this echo and to spread this buff to whichever part of the board that you need for given trades. You've got Lanessa in this deck, so you actually double up each one of these if you do play a Lanessa later on. The Echo also procs other spell effects like Arcane Giant if you wanted to play that kind of a deck. There's some really cool ways to use this. One of the things that I've been thinking about with this card is, in some ways, this is a substitute. Well, I don't know if I'd say it's a substitute. It's in a really decent spot along with Blessing of Kings and along with Spike Ridge Steed. And so far as, if I'm running a Lanessa deck, those are really the only two spells that I wanted to be running, because they're the best buffs that Paladin has, and all the other ones have not seemed to make enough sense. I like how this one is a scalable buff where I can choose to use it early if I really need to, unlike Spike Ridge Steed, which sometimes maybe just sits in my hand and I can't use it. Or I can use it really late and still get really, if I use this on turn 10 and have the luxury to do it this way, I still can get a +5 +12 no +5 +10 minion off of it, and that could be split any way that I want. I think it's really going to be a good card, and I have this as a 4-star card. I do also factor in this Echo. It gets an extra star. Even if I was to say it's only worth a 3-star card, I would still probably give it an extra star for the Echo. So I think that card is really good. Okay, so now we are over to the Cathedral Gargoyle. I think this card is absolutely bonkers. I think it's a 5-star card. Now, if this 5-star comes with a little bit of an asterisk. The 5-star that I'm giving this is assuming that we can make the Dragon Paladin work. Now, I know there's not a whole lot of, there's really probably no Paladin Dragon synergy in class, but the thing is, there's so many good neutral options to bring Dragon into the Paladin class, and I think that there'll be more Dragon synergies coming up. There's a couple of decent Dragon holdovers from the last expansion that's still, or I should say the last, that are currently in Standard, that I think we can make this work. So with the caveat that, we're saying that we can make a Paladin Dragon archetype work, now we're talking about, okay, well, you're getting a 2/2 taunt Divine Shield, and that is crazy good. There was the shielded mini bot that was in every single Paladin deck because it was a 2-mana 2/2 with Divine Shield, and this one takes that and adds taunt to it. Shielded mini bot was probably a 4-star card, if not more. So you add taunt to that, and I think we've got a 5-star card here, and I think it's going to be not the hardest thing to make a Dragon Paladin deck, which will make this actually work. So I have that as actually a 5-star card, which may be a little bit of a surprise to some people. Paragon of Light. This card is a 3-star card in general for me. Um, it's going to be something where you can get this procced from time to time. I think it'll go really good with, for example, Prince Keliseth deck, where it'll just be drawn as a 3-star. I'm sorry, as a 3 or more attack. But it's just so inconsistent to be able to get that I can't really rate it a 4-star or higher. I just think the inconsistency is going to hurt it, but I think it's going to be pretty solid to be able to get this to work. It's not the hardest thing in the world to get one more attack on a paladin minion. So, I think oftentimes you will have this as a 3/5 or a 3/6 or whatnot. And if indeed you get that up to 3, I mean, a 3 mana 3/6, for example, with Taunt and Lifesteal is absolutely 5-star. So, the inconsistency pulls it down a little bit, but nonetheless, the effect is very good, and I think that's going to end up being a solid 3-star card. Next up, we have Bellringer Sentry. This is a 5-star card to me. The mini Mysterious Challenger. I'm very excited about this one. I think this is going to work out just fine. Everyone pretty much underestimated Mysterious Challenger when it first came out, and to everyone's chagrin, that card just ruled the meta for as long as it was there. This one has a great ability of just being coming in earlier. It does both the battle cry and the death rattle, so it's still going to get you 2 of them. I even like the fact that it won't necessarily block itself from using the same secret the way that Mysterious Challenger did. So, and Mysterious Challenger was still a better card than this, but if this is, Mysterious Challenger Light, but it also is cheaper than Mysterious Challenger, I think it's got every bit the potential to really shine. And I think this is going to be a 5-star card, much to the chagrin of non-paladins. So now we have the 2 legendaries for Paladin. The first one I love, the second one I don't. The Glass Knight, I think, is a 5-star card. I know a lot of people have talked about some of the attributes of it being kind of like a piloted shredder in some of those comparisons where you pop the divine shield once and then you kind of still have a 4/3 minion that they got to deal with, which of course is kind of a little bit of an inverse of piloted shredder where you get the 4/3 to start, then you get a weak minion. This one's kind of like the divine shield's the weak minion because it's easy to pop the divine shield, but then you get the piloted shredder at 4/3. I just think that this stat line is going to be so strong, having 4 attack damage on a 4 mana minion that also has Divine Shield and has 3 health. I think that's going to be a very sticky and annoying card for a lot of other decks to work against. And then you throw in the fact that whenever you restore health, you're going to get Divine Shield again. It's just really, really going to be a strong card. You don't have to do the heal version, but there's enough natural healing in Paladin that I don't think you're going to have a problem. There's a lot of lifesteal in Paladin. There's True Silver Champion that brings 2 health back when you attack. There's enough there that you'll even be able to get this to proc without building into a health Paladin. So 5-star card, Glass Knight, really excited to play that one in the upcoming expansion. Now Prince Liam, on the other hand, I think is a 2-star card. I don't think this is going to work out that well. I think that if you're running 1-cost cards, mostly you're going to be talking either very weak minions or you're going to be talking Paladin Secrets. If you're playing Paladin Secrets, you probably are trying to proc Bellringer Sentry, in which case when Prince Liam hits the board, he's going to ruin any synergies that you may have had with Bellringer Sentry. Additionally, Call to Arms is built to work with all of your 2 mana and 1 mana cards, so you're going to want to be running Call to Arms. That's going to then pull your 1 mana cards out, so Prince Liam may not have very many targets that way. Finally, just the fact that if he's not being used to abuse either secrets or 1 mana cards, he's, then there's not much use that you want to have those kind of cards in your deck. Since there's other cards in this in Paladin that use your 1-mana cards that are in your deck better than he does, I just don't see why we'd want to run him. The final thing there is, even if he does proc them the way you want them to, they're turning into legendary minions. That's very hit or miss. It's not very solid of a thing to have happen. You don't necessarily depend on your random legendaries to be good, because they could be good or they could be bad. And finally, you have to draw those anyways at some point. They're not coming to your hand. They're not going into play. So all of those are, reasons that I'm not very high on Prince Liam. I do like his stat line. 5 for a 5/5 is good enough to play, and I do think there will be times when he gets some garbage one cost cards in your deck to become something better, because that is the natural way he's expected to be played, which lets you play some 1-manas earlier in to deck build with 1-mana cards a lot easier, and have those turn into more useful cards later. So there's a little bit of value there. I didn't put him as a 1 because of that, but nonetheless, I don't think it's going to work out very well. I think he's a 2-star card. We now have Ghostly Charger, and this card I like quite a bit, but not a 4 or a 5. I just think that he's going to be a solid and annoying card for them to deal with, for your opponent to deal with. I like the Divine Shield Rush. I think a lot of times he's going to trade 2 for 1 because he's got the high health and the Divine Shield. Of course, with him rushing in, that's going to give him a chance to affect the board immediately. So the only problem, though, is for 5 for the 3/4 stats is not very good. I love everything else about the card, but the stats just aren't quite there to push him up higher than a 3. So I have him as a 3-star card, and I think he'll just be solid but not spectacular. Finally, we have Silver Sword. This is a very expensive weapon, but there's a lot of potential to it. I have this as a 2-star card, and I'm not sure if it might ultimately be a little stronger. I just feel like you're not getting a very powerful weapon insofar as the weapon at 8, and you need to have a board. So, and if you don't have a board, what's the point of this card? If you do have a board, then we're probably talking a win more situation. It could work, of course, really well with Dude Paladin or something that's just continually refreshing its own board, in which case this could be good. So I think it'll be good in Dude Paladin type card decks, but other than that, I'm not even sure if a Dude Paladin needs this, though. Dude Paladin is already buffing its own hand in other ways. This comes out super late. But, it's kind of, it's got some strength in the late game, but I think it's not always going to get there. 8 mana is a lot to pay for a 3/4 weapon. So, started beating around the bush there a little bit, but I have this as a 2-star card, and we'll just see how it goes. There'll be times when it has high highs, but most of the time I think it's going to be low. Now we're moving on to the Priest class. We're starting with what seems to be most people's favorite new card in the set. A lot of people really like this card, and I am right there with them. Camilleos, you've heard it probably before from other places, but ultimately this card just does so much. He's going to be changing into random cards from your opponent's deck, so you're going to get scouting information for the first time ever, be able to see what's going on in your opponent's hand, and being able to see your opponent's hand is really, really strong. You can now play around things that you wouldn't have known. You can, it gives you a lot of information. It's going to be really strong on that aspect. Additionally, people tend to put good cards in their deck, so unlike Shifter Zareth, Shifter, whatever, I forget his name exactly, but unlike the bad legendary that came out previously, that one was a 1 mana, and every turn it just morphed into a random card. This one will actually morph into a random good card because you're playing against humans, and humans don't put in bad cards in their deck. They put in good cards. So I think Camilleos is going to be great. Also, love the art, love the flavor, love the the way that the effect matches the card text and name and art. I just think all across the board, that's a very high quality design from Blizzard, and I'm proud of them. They did a really good job there. Next up, we have Squashling. This card I think is really interesting because it just can do so many different things. I do have it as a 4-star card. I think the fact that it has the battle cry in addition with the restore 2 health is just going to be outstanding. You're going to be able to play the 2/1 for 2. It's not a strong minion at all as far as that part's concerned. The minion part is not strong, but the effect of being able to play as many restore 2 healths as you need to, being able to combo this with a oh, what's her name? Everyone's listening to this and saying, well, it's her name, but the 4 mana 3/5 that deals damage when you heal something. The Soul Priest, or I'm blanking on her name, but you know the name, you know who she is. Anyway, he's going to combo well with her. He can give you right off the top of the bat a 6 mana burn option with her. I just love the versatility of this card. Not quite a 5-star, and by itself, the fact that you have to pay 2 mana for each iteration really drives it down. I'd probably call this a 3-star card in general, but I think the versatility and the echo and the battle cry, there's just a lot you can do with this. Heal yourself up, heal your minion board up, do whatever you happen to need that turn. Very solid card, 4-star card for me. Divine Hymn, I think this is another really strong card. It's hard to say, how good it'll be because we have Circle of Healing for 0 mana that restores 4 to all your minions. That one is really good. Actually, that restores 4 to all minions, period. This one restores to only your friendly minions, which is better insofar as if you're just using it vanilla, you're just using it to heal up your board, it's not going to heal up their board as well. So it's better in that way. The real kicker for me here is that you restore 6 health to your face in addition to all your creatures. So you can take some great trades here. There's access to very high health minions for Paladin, so there's great synergy with the particular class with this effect. The fact that you heal your face for 6, and all of this gets done for 2 mana. I think at the end of the day, even though there's a couple other ways to do healing effects, I think this one does them all so well for what you're trying to do, with the exception of the Acolyte? No, what's her name? With the exception of the, I'll remember her name later on, but the 4 mana 3/5 that deals damage for using health effects. Divine Hymn is a 4-star card in my opinion. I think it's a lot of value for that 2 mana. Moving on to Vivid Nightmare. This card, I think, is a 1-star card. I just don't think there's going to be very many uses for it. There's better ways to do some of the different copyings that you would do. I just don't really think this is going to be a very good card at all. I think it's a 1-star card. It might be actually worth calling it a 2-star card insofar as there will be combos people will try to do with it, but that's going to be inconsistent anyways. So even though there's times when you can do something interesting, you're always just getting a 1 health version of whatever that is, and you're paying 3 mana. So you'd only have 7 mana at the very late game to do anything of any real worth with this. I think it's a 1-star card. I don't believe in it. Glitter Moth. This is a odd style card, and I don't think it's very good. I have this as a 2-star card. On top of it being an odd cost card, which means it's harder to build your board with an odd cost deck because you can't curve stone out on your turn. You are going to have additional strength in the fact that your hero power can keep your minions alive a little easier, but even that is not so much because in Hearthstone people don't usually leave weak or damaged minions. They either decide to damage your minion and kill it, or they decide to ignore it and go somewhere else. So I think your board is going to be hard to find a great board state to get this proc to go off. And even if you get the proc to go off, you're not going to be able to inner fire as a combo, since inner fire is a 2-star card, and you won't be able to finish any kind of great combos with this anyways. So I don't think this card is going to be very consistent, and even then it's a 5 mana 4/4, so it's not really doing much outside of if it was trying to do inner fire combos. There is a minion that can swap the health and attack of all minions on the board. I don't even think that is an odd cast card. I could be wrong. That could be a 3 mana, but I think it's either 2 or 4 mana. So if it is 3, maybe there's a chance you can play that combo in there, but it's still very inconsistent. So yes, again, the Glitter Moth I have as a 2-star card. Holy Water, this one's interesting. There's going to be times when you're going to get some really strong copy to your hand with the 4 damage that kills it, but it's going to be... So there's going to be some nice highs with this card when you kill a minion and you actually get a copy of that minion and it was a strong minion, and then you get to play it either this turn or the next turn. Those times will feel really good. I don't like the inefficiency of 5 mana for 4 damage. I don't like that you have to kill it directly. It would be better if you could just damage it for 4 damage and then you get a copy. So the fact that you actually have to be able to kill the minion and the inefficiency of the mana to damage really drives the star rating down. I have this as a 3-star card. So there'll be some high highs, but it'll be inconsistent. Quartz Elemental, this one is actually pretty good. I have a 4-star rating for this card. I think that, my first thought is, okay, if you wouldn't play a 5 mana 5/6, then why would you care about having a 5 mana 5/8 with such a strong debuff that you can't attack while damaged? Well, in Paladin, I could see you actually wanting to play that 5 mana 5/6 anyways. And in this case, it's a 5 mana 5/8. You can really heal up easily in Odd Paladin, and I think it'll end up being quite strong because you just have the ability to heal up so much in Paladin that I think it's not for the sake that it's a 5/6 versus 5/8. It's the sake that Paladin can really abuse high health cards, and this one gives you a very high health for 5 with a very strong attack value of 5 as well. So the next card is Coffin Crasher. And this card is going to be a really good card. I actually think this is going to be a 4-star card, almost a 5-star card if there were better death rattles in the minion. In the game right now. But some strong death rattles have rotated out, and it's a matter of, right now the death rattles are not going to be the very best. But the effect is super strong. 6 mana, 6/5 is a decent body. It's not a very good body for that mana slot, but it's strong enough to be something they got to deal with. And if they deal with it, they're going to be bringing in oftentimes even worse threats from your hand for free. So I think that this card will be really strong. I have it as a 4-star card. I'd like to call it a 5-star card, but I just don't think there's quite enough death rattle synergy to make it always consistent enough to be a 5-star, kind of like the Void Lord Lackey combo. That combo is a 5-star combo from Warlock because of how it's so consistent. This one won't always do quite that. You can't deck build your way because you still have to draw those cards. So it's a step down from that combo in Warlock, but nonetheless it's very, very strong. My apologies if my face has gone away. I've been a little distracted for the last few minutes because I've noticed that it's gotten dark outside, and so it might be hard to see my face. So my apologies on that, but I think I can turn on a light and maybe try to help it a little bit. But that's pretty weak light, so it is what it is. I just will continue on from here. Next up, we have Lady in White. This is a 5-star card to me. I realize that there's going to be people who are down on it, feeling that, well, you can't put like really weak minions that have very high health into your Lady in White deck because it just won't be consistent enough. But I think that there's just enough. There's enough high health minions in Paladin that she's going to be very consistent. You don't have to go to the really bad cards for the very high swing points. You don't have to go to, for example, there's a new card in this deck that's a 0/9 taunt. Well, for I think 4, there's a 0/9 taunt for 4 that you could put in your Lady in White deck. Now the criticism there is, well, if you draw that card before Lady in White, now that card is useless and you've got a weakened deck as a result. And that's true. I agree with that thought. But I just think there's enough good high health cards in this deck that you won't need to do that. I think you're going to have all good cards that are high health. So in that case, she's just going to make all of those cards ridiculous from the time that you draw her and put her into play. So yeah, I'm very high on Lady in White. I think she's going to be great. Speaking of some of the different minions that she'll be able to buff, Nightscale Matriarch is a 4/9, so that's a very high health minion. And so there's an example where that if you played this after the Lady in White, you would be looking at a 9/9 minion as opposed to a 4/9 with that ridiculous effect. Whenever a friendly minion is healed, summon a 3/3 whelp. 3/3s are far better than 2/2s. Probably as much better as 2/2s are than 1/1s, and they're quite a bit better. 2/2s are quite a bit better than 1/1s because of the AoE resiliency. 3/3s are that much more resilient to things that do 2 damage to the board. So a 3/3 line for these whelps is very, very good. The Nightscale Matriarch, I believe, is a 4-star card, and I'm very excited about that. Even if you don't have a Lady in White procced up Nightscale Matriarch, I think that the high health is making it really hard to deal with. And there's just going to be a lot of annoying synergies here. Like people won't want to generally attack your matriarch or your other cards because of the fear that you're going to just heal them up. If you are playing, for example, Divine Hymn in your deck, you're going to heal them up to a very high amount, and you're going to get 3/3s. It's just it's a very tricky spot for your opponent to be in, trying to figure out how best to navigate their way out of a Nightscale Matriarch board. So that's a very good card, a 4-star card in my book. We're moving on to the Rogue class, and the Rogue class, we're starting with Cheap Shot. Cheap Shot, I think, is a 4-star card. The reason for this is, you've already got Miracle Rogue, you've already got lots of synergies that you want to work with your Auctioneer. This card is giving you so much versatility to just damage, as many minions as you need to. I think that this just has so many synergies. The fact that it's an echo, you're already wanting to do so much with spells anyways in your rogue deck between Auctioneer and Arcane Giant and, the many ways that you want to use spells in Rogue. So this card I think is excellent. I think it's going to be a 4-star card. And even if you weren't so high on the fact that the mana is expensive for each iteration of 2 damage to minions, which I agree the mana to damage ratio is not the best. Again, the Echo moniker to me adds a star, so I have this as a what did I just say? Bear with me a second. I got to see it again. Sorry, I have this as a 4-star card because I do think it's really good. Even if, I think it's a good card. So let's move on to the next card, Pickpocket. Pickpocket is not as good because of the randomness. It's not directly impacting the board. You might get some good cards, you might get some bad cards. I would just much rather be playing Cheap Shot in my deck than Pickpocket and have the consistency of knowing that I can deal with individual threats. There are some synergies with Pickpocket that you can work with some other cards that deal with burglar style effects, and that's going to be good for those particular decks, but it's still pretty expensive at 2 mana for the burglar. I'd rather kind of try to burgle in some other ways if you can. I realize if you're playing a burgle style deck, you're going to want to play the Pickpocket, and that's why it has a 2-star card and not a 1-star rating. But in general, I just would much rather be playing Cheap Shot than Pickpocket. We have the Face Collector. This is a really interesting effect, and it's a little hard to know exactly what to rate this. I'm somewhere between a 4-star and a 5-star card. I just think that the fact that you can play this early on, get a legendary if you're in a bind, it's a decent turn 3 play that can help you get out of a sticky situation, luckily, but that of course is not very consistent. But then just the fact that it's Echo, if you get to the late game, you can add 3 different legendaries to your card, to your hand, and still having 2 2s on the board. There's really a lot of interesting ways that this can help you out. At the end of the day, I wafer on it just enough to make it a 4-star rather than a 5-star. I think if it was a 5-star, I think I'd be a little bit more excited about the card if it was truly a 5-star. And this, while it's a good card, no question, I think it's got a lot of great use. I do think it's a 4-star card. And that already accounts in the Echo, by the way. For example, if this was a 3 mana 2/2 add a random legendary to your hand, that would be a 3-star card. That would not be a 4-star card. So the Echo is what's bumping it up into that 4, maybe 5. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and say this is a 4-star card. Blink Fox, I think, is really cool. I talked earlier about how I'd rather play a different burgle effect if I'm playing a burgle rogue. Blink Fox is just the kind of burgle effect I'd be looking for. 3 mana 3/3 is a solid body. I like it a lot more than the 1 mana 1/1 of Swashbuckler with the same effect. I just think this will work, of course, in your burgle combo card decks, but it also works just fine as a 3-drop that gives you a card. This will be a really good addition to Rogue. Cutthroat Buccaneer. This one is kind of needed because the 4 mana pirate that does the same thing as rotating out. This one's a little bit lower cost, but a lot worse stats. I think this will be a solid 3-star card. I think it'll be useful. You're really going to want to use it in your Kingsbane deck, and there's a new weapon for Rogue also that you would like to buff. So I think this will be useful enough. It's not going to be an amazing card, but it also is going to be very useful in the decks that want to use these cool Rogue weapons. And Rogue does have some really nice weapons, so that's a solid 3-drop for me. Next up, we have Wanted. I just think Wanted is a bad card because of the coin, the cost it's costing you to get a coin in your hand. Coins are very useful to Rogue because of the combo abilities, because of the spell synergies. There's a lot of good use for coins, but no coin is going to be worth 3 mana. I mean, for a class like Rogue, you'd want to be doing 3 damage to a minion at about a 1 mana cost. I mean, that's probably too cheap. You probably would never get that. But a 2 mana cost would even be a little expensive because there's better ways to do it out of Rogue. In this case, though, it wouldn't be worth 2 mana to get 1 coin. That's asking too much. And you wouldn't even run that particular card if this card cost 2 mana for 3 damage, I don't think. So that coin is costing you way too much. I think this is a 1-star card. Whoops. Oh, I see. how did I go forward? I didn't want to go forward here. Sorry about that. Okay, so the next card, this is a really good weapon for Rogue, Spectral Cutlass. I think that, it's a little bit wonky insofar as you really need to be playing Burglar Rogue, and I don't think Burglar Rogue is very good. So I unfortunately don't think that Spectral Cutlass as a result will be very good. It's too inconsistent to depend on random cards coming in and being very strong. Plus, this goes up against Kingsbane a little bit. Kingsbane can do these same things that this is doing, but the difference is you don't have to build around this one as much as you do have to build around Kingsbane, so there's a little bit of extra synergy there. At the end of the day, I think this is about a 2-star card. I think the fact that Kingsbane can do it as well, if you really were committed to doing it, and it's in a deck that I just don't think is very good with burglaring effects and needing that, I think this is a 2-star card. Mist Wraith, I think this is a solid 3-star card. It's going to be a matter of how many echoes and what are the synergies you're working on with your echo cards. Nonetheless, 4 mana for a 3/6 would be considered a good solid stat line for a card that has a good effect. This card, I think, can grow decently well, and we know from Questing Adventurer that, that's one valid win condition for Rogue is to get a minion that sticks, and then they just kind of keep dealing with your opponent's minions while the Questing Adventurer just keeps growing. Well, this one has higher income stats when it starts off, and for example, I can see you playing cheap shots with the Echo ability, and every time you play that cheap shot, this is going to be growing. It only takes 1 Echo card to make this card strong enough that you would run it definitely. 3/6 would be a really solid stat line. This is only 1 off of that, but it grows. So, those are all good positive reasons that I like the card. But at the same time, it is, it's kind of getting a little bit late in the game to be doing that. It's just like Questing Adventurer. You couldn't just plop it down super early and do all your shenanigans. You kind of had to have the cards in hand, or you had to have like well, that's why Miracle was Miracle, because you could always pull off miracles without having them in your hand back in those days. But so this is a 3-star card. It's I think a very good card. Not a great card, but it's strong enough to run and be able to be a win condition for you. Next up, we have Cursed Castaway. This is a 1-star card for me. I don't think this is a very good card at all. Rogue class can do removal extremely efficiently. You don't need to have the rush effect on a 6-mana card to destroy particular minions on your opponent's deck. Additionally, the Death Rattle Draw combo card is, it's not that special, and yes, you're going to draw a card when it dies, but I think you're paying way too much for that effect. And then just like the coin not being worth what you had to pay to get the coin payoff, I also don't think that drawing a particular combo card from your deck will be worth the payoff. I think that's a 1-star card. Tess Greymane, this is a 3-star card to me. I think the effect is so cool and amazing when you get to replay every card that you've played. And it's not just spells, it's minions get played, it's buffs get played, it's removal gets played. Now removal's not the best because you might yog yourself with when that comes in. You don't want to remove your test, so you got to be careful about what battle cries you play, but or what cards you play. But if you just have in mind that I've got a Tess Greymane, and then as you burglar cards into your deck or into your hand, you could just be mindful that, oh, I don't want to play that card because later on that'll proc on my Tess Greymane. Nonetheless, the problem is that you really will never know going into a game what your opportunities are going to turn out to be. So it's just way too inconsistent with what cards are you going to randomly get during the course of that game. And even of the cards you get, some of them might be horrible and you wouldn't want to play them. Some of them might be great, but you don't want to play them because you don't want to risk ruining your Test Greymane combo later on. Let's say you get Brawl randomly, and it's like, okay, that's great. I want to Brawl the board because it's a strong card, but I don't want to Brawl the board because I don't want to lose my Test Greymane when she procs in and everything else that she brings with her. It just ruins my swing play. Very high highs because, of course, the effect can really, if you happen to get good cards or situationally good cards, you're going to really get a lot of value out of each of those cards that you're able to play. But I think with the inconsistency, I have to rate this a 3-star card for as a result. Very high highs, but just not consistent enough to get a 4-star or 5-star rating in my book. Moving on to Shaman. Shaman Zap. I think Zap is a great card. I actually think this is a 5-star card. 0 mana for 2 damage is just going to be outstanding. The Overload 1 is obviously going to hurt a little bit, but in a lot of situations, the Overload is good. It's something you specifically want. This is also giving you a chance to, you can totem, depending on if you're doing, you can do this with even Shaman and get really cheap totems out. And so your spell damage can come out on turn 1 and make this a 3 damage card on your turn 1. There's a lot of different ways that this card just has so much versatility, costing you 0. You could play it any time. It doesn't matter what else you're trying to do that turn. It does cost you next turn, but if you consider that the gold standard is 2 mana for 3 damage, this is a 2 mana discount-ish to that. And even the fact that it's 1 mana next turn can be offset by just how valuable it is to have a 0 mana play. That in itself is worth so much more than a 1 mana play, because you can do whatever else it is you'd like to do with the mana that you have in your hand that turn. Zap for me is a 5-star card. I'm not worried about the Overload, and I think that's going to be a phenomenal card. Great design. I like also that it doesn't hit face. I think that'd be too strong if it did. So good job on Blizzard for that design. Witch's Apprentice. I think this is a 4-star card, and it's a little bit of a caveat here. I realize that the effect itself is basically Babbling Book, but I think some of the Shaman spells are quite good for Control Shaman. You've got a lot of control style spells that can come out of that, so that's really good for a controlled deck. But the other thing is, this one is a taunt, and taunts are really annoying to deal with, as opposed to a 1/1, which is just super easy to work around. It's almost as if it's not even there, except for the very beginning of a turn. A 1/1's got some value because it can contest your opponent's very first minion. But and even oftentimes that's not enough. A lot of minions have more than 1 health. So I like the fact that this comes in as a taunt frog. I think, by the way, the flavor of the deck, of the card, is awesome. That whole hex thought that they have here is really funny, and the art is really kind of funny too, with the way he's looking. Anyways, I think this is a good card. I think it is a 4-star card because it's giving you not only it's not giving you not only a Shaman spell, it's also giving you a taunt, and as we're going to see later on, it just combos great with Hagatha, which is one of the big cards you're going to be looking to play in this deck. Another thing is it has Battle Cry, which will also work quite well with the other legendary that we're going to get to as we get down to Shudderwalk later. So this card just has a lot of synergy with what the current Shaman is going to be trying to do, and I like it better than Babbling Book, and the fact that I like the annoying taunt that your opponent actually has to work around. Not, of course, that's a very difficult taunt to work around, but it is a thing that they have to run a resource into, as opposed to Babbling Book, which they could just ignore the Babbling Book. Okay, so Blazing Invocation, I do not like these kind of cards at all. Discover a Battle Cry minion. This to me is just the same as I Know a Guy, or just there's been a few attempts at these kind of cards where you pay 1 mana to get discover a certain kind of card. You should just run the certain kind of card that you want to be playing. It's not worth it to pay the 1 mana in order to get some random discover, because there's so many bad battle cries in the entire deck, in the entire game, that you're just, more often than not, you're not going to be finding a minion that was worth 1 extra mana on top of whatever it was to play. You're going to find a lot of bad minions with this card, and even when you find a good one, you're finding a good one that you had to pay 1 extra for. So I think that's a 1-star card. I don't I don't like it. Merc Spark Eel. Merc Spark I have as a 2-star card. I think the 2 damage would have really worked if it was a 3 damage. This card could have been really good as a 3 damage card, but just it's forcing you to be in an even style deck. Even style I think is weaker than odd style. I like, especially in Shaman, being able to spam the Taunt Totem in the odd style deck if that's what you're going for. But even style, just spamming random totems is not as good as paying for taunt specifically if you're looking for that, or you can set up spell damage or whatever your situation may need in the odd style one. And then again, it's just a 2 for a 2/3 that deals 2 damage. That's good. That card would be a good card if it didn't have the even thing. But even cards lose a star for me anyways. If this didn't have any drawback on the card, it would probably be it's hard to say because 2 for 2/3 is not very strong. But with the Battle Cry of 2, you'd probably give it about a 4-star, generally speaking. But this one, this one I think just the even cards I don't believe in as much in Shaman as I do the odd cards. So I just feel this is a 2-star card at the end of the day. Ghostlight Angler. Ghostlight Angler I think is a 2-star card. I don't think it's going to work with Murloc synergy specifically. It doesn't have rush like the Hunter one did, although it's not up against such a direct competition as the Hunter Hound was. But at the end of the day, it's a 2-mana 2/2. That's just keep playing this card. It'll work well with Hagatha, but it doesn't have Battle Cry. It doesn't have there's a lot of ways you can proc Hagatha without doing it this way. So I just don't think this is a very good card for the deck. I think it won't see play. I think it's a 2-star card. Earthen Might, give a minion +2/+2. If it's an elemental, add a random elemental to your hand. Now, that one I think is really going to be interesting, and I think it's going to be good. I think this is a 4-star card. I compare it a bit to, it's somewhere between Netherspite Historian and the Beast card that gave you a Beast +2/+2 and drew a card. I'm blanking on the name off the top of my head, but I do think that this card is Mark of Yasharaj. I think this card is really an interesting blend of those two mechanics. Each of those cards is really important to the decks that they're in, and I think that this card will be really important to the decks it's in. I don't think it's quite a 5 just because you do have to have an elemental on the board first, and and what it's giving you is a random elemental as opposed to a straight up draw from your deck. So it's not quite as good as Mark Shiraj in the draw it's giving you. It has that same effect of the Mark Yasharaj in the +2/+2+ draw, but it's the random elemental instead of a pure draw. And I think it's great. I think it's going to be a really good card, but I don't think it'll be a 5-star. I think it compares just a little bit below Mark of Yasharaj and Netherspite Historian at 4 stars. The Totem Crusher. I think the art on this one's really funny. I crack up when I see the little guy guarding, his little cave there. But anyways, at the end of the day, I don't think the card is very good. I think it's a 2-star card. I'm glad it has Taunt. That has some potential. But the fact that you have to destroy all your totems is really the death nail. It would have been actually probably doable to just let this say give +2/+2 for each totem you have. At taunt, you'd have to have at least one taunt on the board to make that worth it. So it would have already had some inconsistency because you can't just play it on turn 4 just because you want to. If you were going to be generating a taunt, then you would have to add that to the mana cost of the combo for that turn. So you'd be looking at more like needing to have two. You'd have to have like two. What's the word? 2 totems before it would have been worth it. Even 1 totem probably wouldn't have been worth it. So the fact that you have to destroy them on top of that is really, really unfortunate. And I think as a result, this card won't see play. I think it's a 2-star card. It does have taunt and it does have the capacity to work with certain different combos. So there's some potential in some ways, but it's just not really going to happen in general. I think it's a 2-star card. The Bog Shaper, I think, is really, really cool. I have this actually as a 5-star card. Whenever you cast a spell, draw a minion from your deck, and you're going to have lots of spells in this deck. I mean, you're probably going to be running Hagatha, and she's going to be feeding you spells for playing minions, and then you're going to play minions. They're also going then you're going to play those spells, and then you're going to draw more minions. It's just going to work great with Hagatha. Now, of course, that's a little bit of a perfect world scenario I'm describing, but also I like the fact that you can just play this from the natural cards you have in your hand for removal against your enemy's board. So you can play your removal spells and get new minions from your deck to keep the snowball rolling. He does a good job of helping you just keep everything under control. And again, he's going to combo so well with Hagatha that I think this is going to be a great card. I even like the fact that he's got 8 health, which makes him nice and tanky, hard to destroy. And with that effect, with that health, I think he's well worth the 7 mana. So here's the Hagatha the Witch. This card is a 4-star card for me. I think I'm going to change that to a 5-star card. I think the big thing here is that the battle cry is going to be really strong. You're going to be dealing 3 to all minions, which is going to wipe board, quite enough times, especially against aggro. It's going to be very useful to, you can always trade whatever you had on a board if you need to. You just have a lot of flexibility with the battle cry to take care of the board and get back to a good state. The fact that she clears the board so well is then going to put you in a very good position when you start using her hero power. Her hero power is whenever you play a minion, you generate a random spell. So that's going to be great. And I think she's really strong. So I have her as a 5-star card. And then finally, what I think will be the best, most powerful card of the deck, of the expansion, Shudderwalk. I mean, that ability is just ridiculous. Battle Cry, repeat all other battle cries from cards you played this game, targets chosen randomly. There's going to be 1-turn kills available through this. There's going to be you're going to be able to deck build in such a way that you're going to be able to get life back, damage them, put taunt, put multiple copies of this on the board. He's going to have such an impact to the game state every time that he hits the board. I think that it's just going to be the strongest card by far in the deck by the time everything's said and done. I wish I thought another card was going to be the strongest, because I'm sure many people are expecting that Shudderwalk is going to be super strong, so I don't get to present the sleeper of the expansion being Shudderwalk. But anyways, I think Shudderwalk is going to be outstanding. I think it's by far the best card in the deck. or I'm sorry, in the expansion. 5-star card for sure. Okay, next we're going to Warlock, Witchwood Imp. I think this is a pretty solid card for Warlock. I think that this is a 4-star card because of his strength with Zoo specifically. I think he does really what Zoo would want to be doing. With the stealth and the 1/1 for 1, you've already got something to work with because there's a lot of good just combos, the ability to buff up this early on. I think that there's enough demon synergy that you can, well, I shouldn't say there's enough. There's not a lot right now in the current standard meta, but I do think that this will be a strong card with the ability to be buffed up a little bit, but then the death rattle that early on is going to make very sticky minions that are going to be hard to deal with for your opponent. So, you're going to get like 3 2s on turn 2 that are going to be buffed up to, 3 4s, really hard for your opponent to deal with while you're still spamming the board as Zulok can do so well. So I think he's good. I think he's going to be really strong. He's a 4-star card. 1-mana cards are really important to Zoo, and I think he's a good one. Dark Possession, I don't think this is a good card. I think that this, where is it? I think it's a 1-star card. 2 damage to a friendly to discover a demon. You can do each of those much better. You're not really in a position where you want to be discovering demons. You want to be recruiting them. Dealing 2 damage to a friendly character is really only something you want to do if you want to destroy the character, and you can do that much better with, is it Dark Pact? Yeah, Dark Pact, to get 8 health instead. I just don't see a lot of good use for this particular card. I think this is a 1-star card because I think that the things that it does, you can do a lot better in other ways. Curse of Weakness. Now, this is a 5-star card to me. I am really interested and surprised that they let this go through your opponent's turn. I at first thought this was just, kind of like pint-sized potion where it weakens their board and then you can make your trades and then everything goes back to its normal state. And I was already interested in that because unlike pint size, which gives you a -3 to all the minions for 1, you can make this whatever you need it to be and trade into the board. And I already thought that was pretty interesting. But the fact that, and because it's a control, well, I would see this in a control Warlock, you oftentimes can get quite late into the game before you have to use this effect. So it's not that hard to use the mana it costs to do this effect. But when you factor in that this card is going to keep them weak on their turn, which is going to pretty much make them whiff on their next attack, that's just super strong. It continues to have all the echo synergies that we've been referring to earlier, and that's a 5-star card to me. So now we have Duskbat. Duskbat, I don't think this is a very good card. I have this as a 1-star card. If your hero took damage this turn, summon 2 1/1 bats. Okay, not a big deal. You also gonna have to, generically speaking, you're gonna have to proc that somehow. I know there's a couple ways to have yourself being hurt, but those cards are really bad anyways. So you're gonna generally have to spend mana to make your hero be hurt this turn. And if you're spending mana, then you're spending too much because 4 or 5 mana for that effect and those stats is not worth it. I think that this is a bad card. I think it's just going to cost too much to get the procs off. I'd rather spend that mana doing something else. So this, for me, this is a 1-star card. The Rat Catcher. The Rat Catcher, I think, is a really good card. I actually have this as a 5-star card. It's got the rush, and you're going to be able to, let's say whatever the minion is that's on the board that you're going to be targeting with the Rat Catcher. Let's say you have a mountain giant or whatever's on the board. So you attack with that, do whatever you wanted to do with that one, and then you basically get to have that copy of that minion all over again for 3 mana. that by itself would maybe sound like, oh, that's not worth it because, well, I'm losing that minion to begin with. But the fact that you get to immediately impact the board with that minion a second time is really, really strong. And not only that, but he does have two innately. So what that means is that you're getting a 2/2 rush for 3, which is not horrible. It's not something you'd necessarily, you know, you probably want to get 3/3 for rush normally, but the fact that he can be so big, so fast is great. And let's not forget that there's plenty of times you want to destroy your minion. That's kind of my reason I didn't like Dark Possession is if I'm trying to destroy my minion, I got better ways to do it. Here's one example. So I just think he's going to be a real game changer. He's going to work really, really well, and that's a very strong card. That's a 5-star card in my opinion. Blood Witch, I think this is a horrible card. This is a 1-star card. I get what they're trying to do there, and 4 mana for a 3/6 with a good effect is what you're kind of looking for those good 4 mana card stats. But this effect is negative. It's really a bad effect. I'm surprised that they treated that like it's a positive, because I get that they're trying to say, hey, look, you can proc things without having to do the damage to yourself anyways. But if that's the case, you know, you don't want to be getting double hit for it. Like, you know, those other cards, you could proc it just by hero powering. There's other ways to damage yourself without continuing to damage yourself. And this one continues to do it. So what if you can't really control, what if you can't get rid of this card and it's not having a big impact on the board and it's just continually damaging you for what? So that you could get your Dusk Bat off with 2 1/1 bats? That's not worth it. End of the day, this stat line with this effect needed to have a bigger stat line. You couldn't just take the generic good stats and put that effect on as if that's a good effect. Compare this to Feast of the Priest, where you get that really good effect Feast of the Priest gets. Compare it to the new Legendary Hunter, where you're getting 4 mana, 3/6, give all your minions rush. Now that's a good effect. This effect is a negative effect that can only be turned into a positive if the situation's correct. As a result, Blood Witch needed to have much better stats. That is a 1-star card. That's really not good at all. Fiendish Circle is another 1-star card. What can I say? It's Calling the Finishers. Calling the Finishers had more synergy to it than this does, and it was never played for good reason. That's just a bad card. Death Web Spider is another bad card. There's actually quite a few highs in this class and quite a few lows. This is one of the lows in my opinion. Death Web Spider is just, to me, this is a 1-star card because, again, if your hero took damage this turn, then get this effect. Well, first of all, the effect that we're talking about is probably not worth running something like Blood Witch in order to gain that effect. All this is a 2 health buff to Bloodworm. You could play Bloodworm, which is a 5 mana 4/4 beast with lifesteal just from the neutral class, and you won't have to hurt yourself at all. This gives you a 2 health buff over that, but you have to have taken damage this turn. It's not worth making your bringing in the Blood Witch to make that happen. And if you're not doing it that way, then you're pretty much going to be paying your hero power to do damage to your face, or playing a minion situationally that'll do a damage or 2 damage to your face. Those things are just driving up your mana cost. So pretty much now your mana cost difference between that 2 health that you're getting is, a 6 mana for a 4/6 or a 7 mana for a 4/6 lifesteal. Why not just run a 5 mana 4/4 Bloodworm if you're looking to have lifesteal in your deck? I don't know why the community rated it so high here, but to me this is a 1-star card. I'd much rather just play the Bloodworm if I'm looking to play that at all. Now, both of the Warlock legendaries are absolutely amazing. I have them both as 5-star cards. Let's start with Glinda Crowskin. 6 mana 3/7 is not a great stat line, but I'm glad that they put the heavier end on the health so that hopefully she can have a little bit of a chance to survive a turn. Um, but there are ways to get some discounted creatures in your hand. So this definitely has the ability to proc the echoes on the turn that you play it. You can have arcane giants. You can have there's different ways you can have corridor creepers. I don't know that there's a corridor creeper deck that I'm particularly interested in, but just the fact that all the minions in your hand now have Echo opens up a world of possibilities on the very turn that you play her. And beyond that, there's also, if you can play her, if you can get her to stick till the next turn and have a little bit more mana access, you really can be looking at a win condition there very quickly. So I think this is a great card. I just see a world of ability in here. She's a win condition on her own, and there's going to be combos that are just going to be awesome. Having minions with Echo, any minion with Echo is just going to be really, really strong. Finally, we have Lord Godfrey. This is great. You know, I like the fact that it's not only Defile, but Defile with 2 damage means it's that much more potent to get the kill that you need to keep the chain going. Sometimes Defiles are coming down to, oh, I've got a 1 mana, I've got a 1 health and a 2 health minion on the board, but then there's no 3 health minion. So then your Defile stops there. It comes down to counting every single piece and having it all line up together. Well, Lord Godfrey lets you, really just gives you a lot of freedom because of the fact that he does 2 damage with each ping. He should be really easy to get the full board clears that you're looking for. And he leaves you with a 4/4 body at the end of it. Great card. Warlocks are going to really like this one. So that's the Warlock class. Let's move on to the Warrior class. The first card is the amazing 1-star, the amazing 1 mana 5-star card that is just going to be, this is the leader of the 1 mana minions for the foreseeable future. This card is very, very strong, and hold on, I'm trying to find something here. Oh yeah. So just the ways that this can work with so much of your deck. Drawing rushes, warriors actually do, it seems that they've been set up to be the strongest rush class in the game, so they've got really good rush synergies in their minions. This minion having 1/2 instead of 1/1 is going to make him really strong. I actually think they should have made him a 1/1 to really give him any chance to be balanced, because the draw of the rushes is going to just feed so many good rush synergies. It's going to feed your woodcutter's axe synergy, making that weapon, which would have been just a good solid weapon, it's going to just make it a really, really super strong opening. And in a lot of ways, I think Rush Warrior is going to become the new Pirate Warrior as a result of how strong this card hits the board immediately. So Town Crier is a 5-star 1 mana card. And for the foreseeable future, I don't think any card is going to challenge it for the best 1 mana card in the game. Next we have Warpath. Warpath I don't think is the best. It definitely has some strong upside to certain situations because of how much Warrior likes to use, whirlwind effects. But the thing is, Warrior already has in the Death Knight the whirlwind effect that he can access without having to pay all that mana and having to have a card used up in the slot. There's already so many ways that Warrior can already do the whirlwind effect. They've got the 4 mana weapon that pings it twice. I just don't think you need Warpath. Yeah, it's a way to continue to Warpath and continue to use that effect multiple times in a turn, but Warrior already does board clear extremely well, so I don't think you need Warpath to be doing really much of those things that it's doing. The community looks like they have it pretty high, but I don't think this is going to ultimately be a very useful card. I do have this as a 2-star card. Red Band Wasp. Red Band Wasp I have as a 2-star card. It's just kind of whatever, it's you wouldn't run it as a 2/3. It'll have the you wouldn't run it as a 2/3 as far as you wouldn't generally be looking to put 2/3s in your deck. The rush effect will be useful, but at one attack it won't do a whole lot, and then it's going to be hurt, so then it's going to be at the best it'll be a 4/2, which will be super easy for your opponent to trade into it. I don't think with the low health it's going to really get 2-for-1s anyways at the 2-mana slot, so they could have played with this a little bit to make it a little weaker, get it down to a 1-mana card. It could have been really strong. But at a 2-mana with this effect, I think that's a 2-mana card. Not very strong at all. Woodcutter's Axe. The axe itself is just a solid, fine card. 2-mana for a 2/2 is fine. The Death Rattle is not generally all that strong, which is fine. But the difference here is the synergy that it has with Town Crier, and then Town Crier pulling in other rush cards is just going to make it really easy to get this proc off. And if you're getting this proc off consistently, then you're getting a lot of value for this card. I think it would have been just a run-of-the-mill, maybe 3-star weapon, but just because of the synergy with the Town Crier alone, I think this is going to be a 4-star weapon. Yeah, that's going to be a strong rush. Is going to be very strong, I think, for the warrior deck. Next up, we have Rabid Worgen. 3-mana, 3/3 rush is very good. That'll be one of the cards you might pull with your Town Crier. It might be one of the cards that you kind of try to combo with Woodcutter's Axe to get a nice early 4/4 with rush and 2 damage to face. So that's 6 damage you can affect the board with. So it's solid. It's a 3-star card. It's not spectacular, but it's solid. Next up, we have Militia Commander. I think Militia Commander is a really strong card. I have this as a 4-star card. I really like the stat line. The fact that when you play her, she's a 5/5 with rush for 4 mana means she's going to 2-for-1 most of the time. The 5 damage will be enough to kill most things she's coming in on that slot for, and she's still going to remain afterwards with 2 attack. Maybe she'll be a 2/2 or something when her attack is done, but she's taken out something. She's trading up for the 5 attack since she has a 5 attack on her a turn that she's played, and then she's still leaving something on the board. So I think she's a really strong card. Additionally, again, she might have synergies with Woodcutter's Axe depending on if you hit her with the turn. But just there's a lot of good rush cards in Warrior. I think this is one of them. So that's a 4-star card. By the way, I'm going to mention that rush I think is going to be a very strong mechanic because just the effect to they took a lot of the power. What's the word? What's the word I'm thinking of? Budget. The power budget, let's say, of the effect of rush, and they really didn't make you pay a lot in the power budget for it the way they used to for charge. Let's look, for example, at Rabid Worgen. Rabid Worgen's competition would probably be the Wolf Rider, which is a 3/1 charge for 3. You're getting 2 additional health for the rush, so you're getting a lot of extra power in the card for having rush instead of charge. Well, rush is just gonna. So I'm saying that it's almost not quite a throw-in, but they're putting a little amount of value to it, and I think it's gonna become something that you can really use because you're getting strong enough cards that they're not losing a lot in the power. I just said the word. What was that word? I've been talking for a long time here. So anyways, the rush effect is not taking a lot out of the power of each card. and the ability to rush, I think, is going to be far more valuable than the power that they're taking out of the card in order to put that on. If that makes any sense, I hope it does. Okay, let's get on to Darius Crowley. I think this is great. I think this is actually going to be a 5-star card. It's just going to be the kind of card that he can come in. He's not always going to hit the board and do all the things that he wants to do. But there's going to be more times than not, he's going to find a weak target that he can hit. And then he's going to grow immediately by big numbers, getting +2/+2. And if you can keep him somehow just somewhat protected, like let's say you put this in a taunt warrior or something like that, where they can't just come right back at him and take him out, getting that +2/+2 each time that he kills another minion is going to really continue to let you trade up higher and higher minions, continue to keep the board. If you don't need to trade in a given play, you can just attack face instead. I think he's going to be fantastic, and he doesn't cost all that much for what he's doing. 5 mana for a 4/4 is fine. Well, no, 5 mana for a 4/4 is bad, but 5 mana for a 6/6, which he's effectively going to be most times that he comes on the board, is really good. And 5 mana, with the rush and all of that, and then the fact that he scales up, I think he's going to prove to be very, very strong. I think that's a 5-star card. Fester Root Hulk is, in my opinion, this is a 3-star card. It has the potential to be super strong. Of course, that attack value can go out of control really fast. At 5 mana, it's going to be, you're not always going to be able to have the board that you want to have all the minions on the board attacking and doing what they want to do. So I don't know that you're always going to have the other minions on your side to give his attack values higher and higher. And he starts off so low in the attack value that it really takes a few of your buddies to bring that number up to a respectable level. He has a lot of potential once he gets rolling, but he doesn't impact the board very much when he comes on, and he needs a little bit of extra help to get there. As a result, I think he has a lot of potential, but I think he's only a 3-star card. So now we're up on Deadly Arsenal. I think this is a 3-star card. It's going to be able to do some amazing things if you deck build around it. If you put it in with Gorehowl or something like that, then of course that's going to be, 7 damage to the entire board for 6 mana is really good. The reason that has some potential over, for example, Brawl, which seems to be much, it's cheaper and it gets rid of everything but one. But the thing is, sometimes there's just, you need to handle a particular minion and you can't run the risk of missing on that particular minion. And that's where something like this could prove to be very valuable. You probably still run it with your Brawl, but yeah, there's a few big weapon cards that I could see you running in a control deck anyways. Gorehowl is a great one. Sorry. So, but at the same time, here's the problem: is you might draw through your Gorehowls. You don't tend to want to run 2 Gorehowls. You tend to want to run 1. At that point, you may not have a weapon to reveal if you're just trying to deck build around 1. So you have to probably put 2 Gorehowls in your deck to make this work the way you want it to. It just introduces a lot of inconsistency. So I can see where it would be really good at the high points, but I think that there's going to be times when you don't hit the weapon you're looking for. So it's a 3-star card just because of the inconsistency. Finally, we have Black Howl Gunspire. This one, I think it's really interesting, particularly we were talking earlier about whirlwind effects and things like that. You can get this to proc so many times that, there's a world in which you're able to get rid of your opponent's board and somehow just keep whirlwinding this over and over. Let's say you did use the combo that they probably intended of Warpath over and over on an empty board with Black Howl Gunspire. That'll do a lot of damage, and that'll be a high point. But in general, other than that, the fact that you can't do it the turn you play it means he's susceptible to being destroyed that turn. 7 mana is just a high number for an effect that you may not really be able to use the turn you play him, and then next turn you could be dead. You could just not have the combo in hand. It's just asking a lot, and and at the end of the day, the payoff really needs an empty board to be really, pummeling your opponent's face with that. I don't like the idea of pummeling random minions with that because who knows if that's even doing what you need it to do. So, uh, Black Howl Gunspire, I think, is a 1-star card. And so with that, we've done all the class cards, and we are on to the final stretch, the neutral cards. We start here with Swamp Leech. Swamp Leech is a 1-star pack filler. There's nothing really to see here. Move on. Swamp Dragon Egg is a 1-star pack filler. To me, at least, I think that there's not much need to. First of all, the 0-3 stat line is very bad for getting your death rattle off. It's too high of a health to consistently get this off. And if you're going to build ways to destroy your own egg, I'd rather be getting stronger eggs that give me more of a payoff, I know Nubian egg is well since rotated out, but that's an example of what makes an egg worth it to destroy is give me a 4/4 body. The fact that this is just a dragon, random dragon added to your hand, may be good, may be bad. You got to pay for it regardless. And on top of that, you got to find synergies to destroy this egg. Just not worth it. It's a 1-star pack filler, in my opinion. Baleful Banker. Choose a friendly minion, shuffle a copy of it in your deck. I don't like this card very much, but I can see a little bit of potential with there's some decks that recruit things. You can put a big card that you want to recruit back out so that it fishes out of your deck. You could do a little bit with helping in the late game to avoid fatigue, things like that. But in general, I'd much rather play Zola the Gorgon for 3 mana and get that card into my hand so that I can play it again. The classic example that I like so much is Lanessa Zola, and at 10 mana, that gives me such a strong swing turn. I just would much rather see it come into my hand. Baleful has a place in this game. I can see different combos that he'll work well with, so he'll have a place. I just don't like him as much as Zola, and I think he is a 3-star card because he has a good place at times, but it has to be something you're building around a certain combo or a certain quest or something like that to make him worth it. He's not going to be good in a vanilla situation. Spell Shifter, this is to me a 1-star card. There's not much need for spell damage. 2 mana for spell damage doesn't tend to be worth it just for the spell damage. It's okay, but it doesn't tend to be worth it necessarily. And then the stats keep switching around between 4/1 and 1/4. It's just the stats are whatever, but that's a 1-star card. I don't think it's very strong at all. Vicious Scalehide, actually, I don't think it's a very good card. I think it's a 2-star card, but one thing I was thinking about was the mole from the previous Dire Mole from the previous expansion was a 1-mana 1/3 beast that was really played whenever you have early beast synergies, and this is it's a 2-mana 1/3 with lifesteal and rush. The lifesteal is not super important, but the rush could be considered a big upgrade over the mole rat. The problem is that the 1 extra mana is what kills it from being all that good. For a beast, you can easily be getting a 2/3 with, let's say, rush or something like that. The lifesteal is just not quite strong enough to make it worth much, because especially when you only have 1 damage, then what are you lifestealing? It's just not giving you a whole lot of value. When you have 1 damage, what are you rushing? It's not really doing a whole lot for 1 damage. If the stats were reassigned and you somehow had 2 damage, this card would have been a lot better. But as it is, the way it is, I think it's a 2-star card. Lost Spirit is it's pack filler. There's no reason to run this card in your deck. 2 mana for a 1/1. Who cares? You can then give your minions +1 attack. They're gonna die anyway, so why bother it? Hench Clan Thug. I think this card specifically in a rogue deck is going to be really strong. But the fact that it's really only strong in a rogue deck is going to limit it. So in a rogue deck specifically, I think it might be a 4-star card because I think when you hero power up and you have that weapon and you're just continuously attacking, you will be able to continuously grow him. The fact that you can hero power on turn 2 and then on turn 3 you play this and then you get your attack off and he grows to a 4/4 very reliably is already good. 3 mana for a 4/4 in a class that likes to do something like Tempo Rogue. He'll be a 4-star card in that particular deck. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of other conditions that I think he's going to succeed in, and it may or may not turn out that he can be squeezed in at the 3 mana slot. So I think overall I'm going to give him a 3-star rating, but he has a lot of potential in Rogue, I think. Raven Caller is not a very good card, and I think Raven Caller is a 2-star card. I could see a little bit of it can help a little bit with the 2 1-cost minions to your hand insofar as, let's say you're doing hand lock or something along those lines where you value having a bigger hand, then there's some kind of value there. The problem is you won't want to run a 3 mana 2/1 in your hand lock deck because that's such a weak play for a control deck. Then what's the point of that? Nonetheless, there's a little bit of potential there if you're trying to raise up your hand, so I'll give him a 2-star for that purpose, but everything else about him is just not good enough. Reminds me a little bit about how I valued the Witchwood Apple card, where the card itself is not strong at all as far as the 2 mana to get 3 2/2s in your hand is not worth all of that, but I value the card, your hand size that it gave you. So there's a little potential with that. Give him 2 stars as a result. Walnut Sprite is a 3/3 Echo. Not a good card. You wouldn't play a 3/3 vanilla in your hand, but I will give him a 1-star buff for being an Echo card because you might want to do it. The other problem there is Echo cards are vastly more valuable every point of mana less that they cost. So you'd rather run a 2 mana minion most of the time than a 3 mana minion when you're dealing with Echo. And the return is really high as the mana goes down. That said, I do think that that's a 2-star card. Pumpkin Peasant is pack filler. I just don't think that he's strong enough. The lifesteal could be useful, but the stats just swap between bad and worse, and who cares when the lifesteal won't really make up for that. So that's a 1-star pack filler card. Witch's Cauldron, I also think is a bad card. It's intended for a decent use, but it's most closely, I think, related to Cult Leader. Cult Leader costs 1 more mana, but it's a 4/2. So at least it has something you got to deal with on the board with some stats. But the Cult Leader also gives you actual draw. This one's just giving you random shaman spells as opposed to draw, so it's weaker. It also has a 0/4 stat line, which means you have no value in the trading. I think this one's a very weak card. I have this as a 1-star card, actually, with very little hope that this will be used. I just don't see how that's going to be a useful card. Let's see, Phantom Militia is next, and I have this as a 3-star card. I think, comparing this, for example, to Walnut Sprite, in just about every case I could think of, I would rather play the Phantom Militia with the taunt, the additional taunt and the additional health. I think that that's really going to have a lot more use in general. So Phantom Militia, generally I would call it a 2-star card, but I think the abilities with the Echo really does bring it up into a solid 3-star rating. So Pumpkin Peasant, now this is actually just the token version of what we saw earlier here, so nothing to see here. Move on. That's not an actual new card. That's just the alternate version of what that card will morph into. It morphs back and forth between the 4/2 and the 2/4 up above. Nightmare Amalgam. Nightmare Amalgam. I think this is a great card. It's not a 5-star just because it's not quite, it's a 3-mana 3/4. So at the end of the day, what all are you gonna, say is amazing about a 3-mana 3/4 spider tank, right? But just the way that this enables every single tribe synergy you could think of. We've looked at elementals, we've looked at dragons, we've looked at some totem stuff, and of course beast synergy is always important. This enables anything that you're trying to accomplish. So I think that this card is just a deck builder's dream, and it's the way that I think that Paladin Dragon, for example, is going to work. It's the way that a lot of the elemental mage things that I want to try probably are going to work. And I think at the end of the day, this is a really strong card because of the versatility it gives you for deck building. So to me, this is a 4-star card. I feel like it's worth 5 stars to me personally because of how much it's going to unlock my ability to create different tribe type decks. But at the end of the day, it's a 3-mana 3/4, which is not spectacular. So it's a 4-star card. Marsh Drake is really an interesting card. I think that stat line, 3 mana for a 5/4 dragon, is very, very useful. Of course, the problem here is the battle cry is going to just kill him on the next turn. But I think that there's quite a few different decent ways to deal with that Drake Slayer. If you are in if you're in Rogue, you're going to have a great turn 2 to hero power, turn 3 Marsh Drake, and just take out the Drake Slayer. Now you've got an amazing board state for 5/4. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of dragon synergy, so the dragon tag doesn't do you much good in that particular class. But beyond that, there's also a lot of classes that have really strong dragon synergy. And if they can figure out a way to deal with the 2/1, let's say, for example, Dragon Paladin can use this. Maybe you get a token out, or you play a what's the one that does 2/1/1s. There's some different ways. Another thing is you might do this in a Paladin. An odd Paladin deck where you utilize the hero power of two dudes for your hero power on turn 2. They probably have a hard time dealing with both of them, and then you can slam turn 3 your Marsh Drake. So there's quite a few different ways that you can get rid of the poisonous Drake Slayer, and that'll be really important because otherwise you've done all that for nothing. But in general, I think there'll be enough ways to get rid of them that the Marsh Drake will be really strong. I'm expecting really good things out of this card. Actually, I think it's hard for me to say if this is a 3-star or a 4-star card. I think that there's enough versatility in how you can work around it that I think I'm actually going to give it a 4-star rating because I think you'll be able to work around that Drake Slayer. And in the times when you can't beat 3 mana 5/4. That's just an outstanding stat line for that early in the game. Voodoo Doll is probably one of my favorite cards in the deck. In the expansion, there's a couple that just really stand out to me, and I can't wait to play them. But Voodoo Doll is a 5-star card, no doubt about it. I think this card will be all over the meta. It's going to just... There's so many different ways you can proc this. Death Rattle to destroy the minion that you chose. 1 health is super easy to get rid of. 3 mana is really low, so you don't really have to use up your whole turn to destroy that minion. There's a lot of ways to turn that into a positive. You can easily now use this along with Dark Pact, for example, or or some of the different combos that we looked at where Warlock wants to destroy a minion of its own. There's just a lot of cool things you can do with this. But 5-star card, I think this is going to be all over the meta. And the fact that it's not a legendary and you can put 2 of these in your deck means that you're going to draw it very often. So that's going to be a very strong card. I'm expecting big things out of the Voodoo Doll. Tangle for Mystic, this one is not a very strong card. I think that there's a little bit it can do to help you with, a little bit hand buff stuff once again, or trying to mill your opponent. But, for mill, you kind of needed to do a little bit more than just add one card to their hand. And, I think it's about a 2-star card. I just don't think that it's going to be, it's not going to be very useful in general. And the cards that, or the decks that want to use it probably want to use something that does something with 2 cards, not just one measly card. So 2 card. The stats are good. 3 for a 3/4. That's a playable card at that point. But at the same time, it's a 2-star card. I don't expect to see very much play. The Blackwalled Pixie is an interesting card. It's unfortunately too expensive to really get too excited about, because the in order to refresh your hero power, for that to mean anything, that means you had to play your hero power. So you play your hero power for 2, you play this, you refresh the hero power, then you play your hero power again. Now you've got 7 mana invested to get 2 hero powers and a 3/4. Granted, you're probably playing this in a deck that's manipulating hero powers in some kind. You're not just using this for basic hero powers. So you might be using this with your upgraded hero powers and getting decent things like, let's say Paladin getting 7 mana for 7 mana getting you 5 minions, which 4 of them are 1/1s, one's a 3/4. Maybe that's a thing. You could also use it with 1-turn kill Paladin with the Death Knight. There's some different things like that. Another possibility would have been if it was an odd card, then maybe you could have done the cheap hero powers refresh, and on turn 4 you could add 2 hero powers in a 2 mana card or something like that. That would have been strong in certain situations, but long story short, I just don't think it's going to be. I think it's too expensive for what you're getting out of it. Someone will probably find a strong way to use that, and in a way that makes it stronger than it at first seems. But I think it's a 2-star card because it's just not gonna. It's too much mana. The Unpowered Steambot, 0 mana 9 taunt, 0/9 taunt for 4 mana. Is just not going to impact the board at all. I think that the fact that he tanks so much damage could have a little bit of value, but not at 4 mana. If it was a 3 mana, I can see tanking 9 damage being somewhat useful. But for 4 mana, that's just too much, I think, to use him. He has really strong Lady in White synergies, but he's a bad card overall, and I think Lady in White should be using good minions and kind of accentuating already good minions rather than going for everything and risking having a very inconsistent play. So I think this is it's generally, I think it's a 1-star card. I could see some potential because of Lady in White. I mean, 4 mana for a 9/9 taunt is super, super strong, and that's ridiculously strong. And so as a result of that, maybe there's something there, but I'm going to call it a 2-star card because I could see that being worth it. When you do hit that high, it's going to be very high. That's a game-winning high point, actually, but it's so inconsistent, and it's depending on a different card that's making that a good one. So I'll give this a 2-star because it has a potential and a very strong combo, but other than that, it's a very weak card. Night Prowler. If this is the only minion on the battlefield, get +3/+3. Who cares? So you get a 4 mana 6/6. Sometimes, most of the times, you won't be able to get it off. And so 4 mana 3/3 vanilla statted minion would never be played. Even a 4 mana 6/6, even though that's really good, the problem is you can't rely on having that, so you wouldn't be able to deck build around this very much. It's not worth it in your control style deck just to hopefully hit a Doomsayer. I mean, if you're relying on Doomsayer just to proc him, what's the point? You want to be doing stronger things on your next turn with Doomsayer than a 6/6 vanilla minion. Oh, I don't know if I said so, but that to me is a 1-star card. I just don't see any value in this play. I'm sorry, let me back off. It's a 2-star card because there is some value to it. There are some times it would become a strong position in the board, but it's not something I expect much out of. It's a 2-star card. Okay, the Witchwood Piper. This card actually is pretty interesting because of the ability to choose the card. You can deck build around this to get this to give you something good. I really like these kind of effects where you can deck build in the scenarios and the synergies that you're looking to work with your minions. Generally speaking, it wouldn't be worth much to just say, yeah, give me my random lowest card from my deck. However, my lowest cost minion from my deck. However, the fact that you can, put it in a very expensive deck, let's say, and or just you have certain very super strong cards that happen to be low cost minions. Here's an example: is Prince Keliseth. You don't want to be waiting till turn 4 to do your Prince Keliseth. But let's say that you get to turn 4 or turn 3 with the coin and you haven't naturally drawn your Prince Keliseth. This is a good way to get him into play before the game goes too much further in and gives a lot of extra reliability to something like that. So I think the fact that there are ways to manipulate the deck to make this stronger than it first would appear makes this a strong card. I think this is a 4-star card because of the abilities that you can deck build around it and make it strong. Not necessarily the Keliseth play, but that's just an example of one way that you can use this. And you can go all the way up to an almost minionless deck, let's say even a Spell Hunter deck, and you just play, let's say, Witchwood Piper, and then whatever the highest minion that you want could work even in that scenario. So there's interesting ways to work around her. I think something will be found that makes it really good. To me, she's going to end up being a 4-star card. Next up, we have Swift Messenger. Rush, and each turn this is in your hand, you swap its attack and its health. Obviously, this one can work really well with Lady in White, but it's a little hard to say how much value you want to give something just because it works in Lady in White decks, because that's really the value of Lady in White, not so much the value you're getting from the other card itself. In this case, the Swift Messenger, I think, is a 2-star card. The Rush on a 6/2 could be worth, that's a fireball to a minion, but it's not quite there because they might have taunt that's getting in the way. You can't fireball face, so there's some value you lose from a fireball. Fireball's a 5-star card. That's a great card. So this is not a 5-star in that way. Plus, sometimes it'll come in as a 2/6, and if it's a 2/6, you're not getting a lot out of your rush play. Good for you, it'll stay alive, but there's really not much to do with it. The fact that the health and the power fluctuates so greatly also makes it hard to, you've got to wait for the stars to align to get exactly what you're wanting out of this. If you might be waiting for the 2/6 to turn into 6/2 so you can do what you want, but then maybe by that time they've already made a play that took that original target off the board. So there's a lot of inconsistency with this card. I see this as a 2-star card. Mad Hatter, I think, it's funny little flavor to it, and I imagine it'll be funny to watch the hats kind of flying randomly onto minions, but I think it's a 1-star card. I think it's there's not even potential in it because of the fact that it could buff up your opponent's minions. Obviously, the fact that you can play it on an empty board would mean that they won't have a chance to, but then you're asking for a win more card. I'd rather play something else. If I've got an empty board on their side and I've got a couple minions on my side, yeah, I'd rather play something else on 4. So I think Mad Hatter is going to be a 1-star card. Sandbinder. This just like the card we said earlier when we were talking about Witchwood Piper, this also has the ability to have a little bit of deck building, synergy, or you can deck build in a specific elemental you want and play that. I don't think he's so great in an elemental deck. It could be useful in an elemental deck as far as it can make sure that your elementals are still going, but why not just play an elemental if that's the case? If you're looking to keep the elemental chain going, I'd rather play an elemental in that case. So I don't like him in an elemental deck straight up. However, I like him a lot for just getting a strong elemental, whether it's a a class elemental or just, you know, a particular elemental because the effect that you're looking for is there. I think he has got a lot of potential there. Problem is, elemental decks mostly want to be played with other elementals, which means it's harder to do that deck build uh, shenanigans because you generally elementals want to play with other elementals, which means you can't really specifically get the one that you want as much. That being said, there are some elementals, for example, Ragnaros in Wild nowadays, would be a great example of, yeah, I'll play him and get my Ragnaros. That'd be great. So he's a 3-star card. Right now, I don't think there's a ton of elementals that do Ragnaros kind of things, but yeah, he's a 3-star card because that could be something where you're looking for a particular elemental to do a particular thing. Scale Worm, I think this is a great card. I think this is a 4-star card, pushing 5-star if I'm being honest. But it's really, really strong. It's got you should consider this like it's a 5/4 with Rush. And for 4 mana, 5/4s are really good. There's a lot of situations where 4 mana 5/4 is such a strong body for a given class. I'm thinking of Rogue, for example, which likes to do tempo. Mage likes to do tempo. There's different classes that do tempo really well. And if we can consider that this is a neutral, it can go into any class that you want, well, then it's not going to be super hard to find a dragon synergy in that. And having a 5/4 with Rush, not just a 5/4 vanilla, but 5/4 with Rush, is going to really give you a strong board presence. So it trades up. Oftentimes it'll still stick around the board, and if it's a 5/1 after it does its trade, they've got to deal with the 5/1. They can't just leave a 5/1 sitting around and it already did something. So I think this is a 4-star card. It's a really good card. Life Drinker, I think, is actually a 5-star card. It's going to combo so well, specifically, for example, with the Shutter, what's it called again? Give me a second here. Shutterwalk. I think this is going to combo so well with Shutterwalk right off the bat that that'll already make it a 5-star card. But even without that combo in mind, I think that the 6 life swing every time it comes into play is really good. Taking 3 damage to face means you're going to have chances to get around taunts to finish the game. It means you're going to help heal yourself up if you're kind of getting behind and against an aggro or something. Gives you a decent 3/3 body while doing all of that. And there's also other ways to double this damage and double the health. So, this, for example, you can play this in Shaman and double your battle cry and have 6 damage to face and 6 health back. Then you can play later in the game. You can, there's lots of different things that this can do. It's also got the Beast tag, which gives it help in Hunter. I think Hunter, of course, may love to have the 3 extra damage to health to face, while also healing up, and having a Beast on the tag is going to let him do lots of Beast shenanigans and more damage to face. So this is a 5-star card to me. I think it's going to really be meta defining. Next up, we have Fellsor Inquisitor. Lifesteal Taunt is really strong. I like that, but the stats are just horrible. So I don't think this will be a good card. I think it's going to be a 1-star card. It would be great, for example, in Lady in White because of the fact that, a 6/6 with Lifesteal's Taunt would really go a long way. It also could work in certain Paladin buff style decks with the, let's say you Blessing of Kings it or something. If there's a potential here where, it just pings a few times when they have to attack, like with a couple different minions, and you get a little bit of lifesteal back. The problem is, on its base, the lifesteal is not very strong, but I could see this comboing really well with certain Lady in White or buff style things. So I'm going to give this a 2-star because of the potential it has. Base, it's a 1-star, but because of the potential I could see with certain combos, I'm going to give that a 2-star rating. Next up, we have Clockwork automatron. No, automaton. Clockwork automaton. 5 mana, double the damage and healing of your hero power. That's got really strong synergy, of course, with Warlock. Warlock, you would be doing 6 damage, and you would be healing actually. I think because the lifesteal, you get the 6 healing from the lifesteal, and you get to double that. So then you get 12 healing back. So when he's on the board, your Death Knight Gul'dan is going to be a 6-12 swing. That's crazy. I mean, that's like 18 health swing. So of course that would be absolutely bonkers with that particular card. The problem I have is that when you get Death Knight Gul'dan on, except for about the first turn where you can use a little help, you don't tend to need a whole lot of help to finish it out. He's such a strong hero power as well. I don't know if you need this help to get there. However, just to survive that turn after Gul'dan, slap this on the board and just do one big turn with this, that's actually worth quite a bit. I think the combo with Gul'dan is by far and away the strongest one that I would be looking forward to. And I guess what I'm going to give this is a 4-star just because of that. I don't think it sticks on the board for more than a turn, but it's low enough health, I'm sorry, low enough mana that you can get, your big Gul'dan play, or maybe you're trying to do a huge heal. Let's say you're playing Odd Priest and you get an 8 heal off of this. That's really useful too. And you still have 3 mana to play in the late game, so it doesn't completely take your turn to do that. But that Death Knight Gul'dan combo is just way too good. That's going to be game defining. So I think you're going to see one of these in most Death Knight Gul'dan decks, and I'm going to give it a 4-star card because I do think that it'll be in most Death Knight Gul'dans. And then Witchwood Grizzly. This is actually originally this was my pick for sleeper of the. This was my pick for sleeper of the expansion. When it first came out, I was hearing a lot of negative reviews on it. It seems that people are starting to just like it more and more because all the reviews I'm hearing about it right now are really, really high. So anyway, it's a 5-star card in my book, no questions about it. I think just playing it vanilla, oftentimes you're going to get a 3/8 out of it. Against aggro, that's quite good enough for 5 mana to get a 3/8 down. With the taunt and the 3 damage is going to do a lot against aggro. But then the other thing is, if you're playing against a control deck, sure, he's not super strong against a control deck on his initial cast, but there's a lot of shenanigans you can play to get him to come in without the battle cry. Maybe get him to, for example, the Druid has that card that lets you return a minion that died earlier, a beast that died earlier in the game. Now you can get 3/12 with taunt. I think that there's just a lot of versatility to this card that's already going to be super strong against aggro and will just be worth it just off of that purpose alone. And even we'll be able to find different ways to affect control matchups. And yeah, 5-star card, 3/12 taunt. Are you kidding me? That's that's gonna be good. And it's got the beast tag as well, which will give it some additional synergies. Chief Inspector is going to be our new answer to Secrets, since the Eater of Secrets is rotating out. 5 for 6 for 4/6 is decent stats, nothing too crazy. But this is a 3-star card. It'll be used whenever secrets are out of control. It's not too big a problem. It actually gives you a decent minion when that when the secrets are not an issue. You can still plop down a 5 mana 4/6. So it has a little bit more value in that. If you're not dealing with secrets, you wouldn't want to play this card without secrets, but you're not in as much of a high risk condition to go ahead and play this if your opponent wasn't running secrets. I think that's a 3-star card. Rotten Apple Bomb, I think, is a 5-star card. The only difference I have, the only hesitation I have to that is that Witchwood Grizzly is such a good anti-aggro card. I would just play that before I would play the Rotten Apple Bomb. So that's where it does kind of give me some hesitation. But at the end of the day, 5 mana, 4/5 taunt that restores 4 health to your hero is going to be really good. And I just think that the 4 damage is more threatening, for example. It's going to be reliably 5 health, whereas the Witchwood Grizzly in times could be almost useless. I mean, there's scenarios where that could be only a 3/3 for 5 or a 3/4 taunt for 5, whereas this in those cases would be a 4/5 and still give you the restore. Plus, there's times when Death Rattle is an additional keyword that you want. Let's say you're playing Quest Priest or something like that. There's different times Death Rattle has its own value. So I think this is going to be a 5-star card. Very, very good card. Next, we move on to Dollmaster Dorian. Whenever you draw a minion, summon a 1/1 copy of it. The problem I have with this is it's 5 mana, and good news is it has high health stats, which is what it wants so that it can stick around for more draws next turn. But the 2 attack damage really means that they don't risk any. They don't really have to lose much to just trade into him with their board. So the stats are just really bad for a 5 mana card. On the other hand, when you draw a minion, summon a 1/1 copy of it, has very high highs. I think it's inconsistent, so I think it'll end up being a 3 mana card. I'm sorry, a 3-star card. I'm sorry, I've been going at this for a while now, so please forgive me if some of my words are getting a little lost. But I think it's going to be a 5-star card. There I go. I think it's going to be a 3-star card just because of the inconsistency. It's going to have some very high highs, but it'll be inconsistent. Muck Hunter, a lot of people are high on this, comparing this to a, what's the word I'm looking for? Q block. What's, the 5/8 charge. I can't believe I'm blanking on it right now. But anyway, the point I'm getting at is I'm not very high on Muck Hunter. I think that the 2/2 is a little too damaging for your opponent, and it's only giving rush, not charge. It's a 5/8, which is a good value for a rush minion because he can trade into potentially, let's say, 3 different minions, 1 on his own attack, and then he might have enough health left over to still take out 2 more of their minions on the back end. So that's pretty nice. But I just think that the 2 Mucklings that you summon for your opponent are going to be too much to make this a really good card. I think this is a 2-star card. I don't think it's nearly as good as some of the reviews have been talking of it. Gen Greymane. So this is the big card that's going to enable the even style card decks. There's just, my concern there is, yes, it's nice to have even cards and have like almost a throw-in hero power every turn, but it's just your basic hero power, and it's good. I think this is a 4-star card. I think this will definitely have situations where you're going to want to build around it. There's definitely some cards that one combo that is very intriguing is throwing this in your control. The Q block. I'm not Q block. I'm sorry. Throwing this in your handlock deck, and you get the really cheap Warlock hero power to just fill your hand that much easier. That's a specific spot that I could see this shine. Additionally, there's some different scenarios where classes just have really good even style cards, but ultimately the problem is, I just think a lot of the basic hero powers are not worth all you have to throw out of your deck in order to have access. I think specifically Warlock will work around this, and this will be a big card for them in that handlock deck. But in general, I don't think it's as good as the odd counterpart, the Baku one that does actually odd, we'll get to that in a minute. So this is a 4-star card. Mossy Horror is really, there's going to be some times when you can do certain things, but for example, the only place I could see this being effective is in Priest and in Warlock. For the most part, if you're just considering that the opponent has to have 2 or less attack minions just by themselves, I don't think that's very reliable, so it's not going to be worth the 2/7 stats for 6. But as an example of one spot he can really shine is, you throw him in the deck with weakness and for Warlock, and you can get them debuffed by 4 attack. There's not a whole lot of 6 attack minions out there in the first place. And I'm sorry, I should say there's not a lot of 7 attack minions out there in the first place. So on turn 10, your Mossy Horror can easily, with weakness, just wipe out the entire enemy board. And since you're only debuffing the opponent's board, you're going to keep your board. So that's super, super strong with Warlock, and I think it will find use in that deck. Beyond that, you might be able to find some use with Pint Size Hunter if it's still in the set. I don't know for sure if Pint Size is even still going to be in the set. But anyways, off of the strength of Warlock only, I'm going to give it a 3-star rating because it will be very strong in that particular deck. But other than that, it's a very, very weak card in a general sense. Countess Ashmore, I have this as a 5-star card. You're going to be able to deck build around this. You'll find Rush, Lifesteal, and Death Rattle cards to put in your deck that she can draw, and she's a much better curator. The stats are good. 7 for a 6/6 is just fine. Much better than the 4/6 with Taunt that Curator came in with. So she's got a more presence body, and the things that you'll be able to find in those different options. I love that she's a neutral, so it gives you access to, different. For example, Warrior will have a way to, of course, have Rush and Death Rattle. Lifesteal, they've got to find something, but they'll find it. And, I think about Paladin with all the Lifesteal options, and then they just got to find Rush, and they have the Death Rattle. You've got a Tyrion just waiting for her. So that's a 5-star card. I'm excited to play Countess. Furious Etten. This is really an interesting card insofar as it's almost an Ancient of War. My only problem with it is really just the strength of these 5-mana taunts getting in the way. We've really got some strong 5-mana taunts, but at the same time, I think there's going to be decks that would love to have an Ancient of War in their deck. And this is actually more resilient to silence than Ancient of War. So just the fact that it's an Ancient of War that any class can have access to, I'm going to give this a 3-star. I think it's really good for that. The problem is you have to get to 7, and 5 is 5 has such good options already in the neutral taunts. But that's a good 3-star card. I think that having an Ancient of War, I've had plenty of decks where I wished I could put an Ancient of War in it. So that should be really good. Azalina Soul Thief. This one is really just a combo. This one's very interesting for all kinds of different things you might be looking to do. I could see, of course, you can do aggro decks where you just aggro out on the board, and then you Azalina, and you refill your hand with now new options since you've already used all of your cards from the aggro style. There's also different combos where you may what was the example I had earlier? Let me actually see this, because I think there's another cool combo with this that I wanted to bring up. You could actually, for example, Baku, do play this in an Odd Warrior deck with Baku, and just tank up. Use your armor spells, use your removal spells, use all your hand to just be dealing with threats while you tank up, and then slam this on the board when you've depleted your hand, and now you've got tons of armor. You've got their exact same hand state, so it's going to be hard for them to wrestle this game back from you, because whatever they have to work with against you, you now have that in your own hand, and so you're just probably in a better spot overall just starting off at that point. So those are a couple areas I think that this will have some real interesting play. On its surface, just as a generic scenario, I don't think this is good at all. 7 mana to replace your hand with your opponent's is mana hungry, which means you can't like burn out your hand and then play this and get much value that way. But I do think there's going to be some scenarios where you can just deck build around this and make this a game-winning move. For example, the 2 I just brought up. I think this is ultimately a 4-star card because of those situations and just how strongly this can be deck built around. It's a little too inconsistent to be a 5-star card, but I think it's got a lot of versatility. Another thing worth mentioning is in certain control matchups, you can just put this down on the board when you have other control parameters in place, and now you know exactly what your opponent's working with. They don't know, well, I'm sorry, they do know what you're working with as well because they now see your hand. But okay, next we have Wormguard, which is a dragon version of Furious Etten, if you will. It's it's just very similar to this, which is also, of course, very similar to Ancient of War. 11 health on a taunt minion is insane. You don't need more than 4 damage on a high health taunt minion because 4 damage is enough to dissuade most attacks. They're not really worried. I'm sorry, they're already worried about attacking into this because they're losing either the entire minion. It's just a very high attack value to have on a high health minion. In this case, I don't know. It's better than Etten in situations where it will be played. The 4/11 is better than 5/9. But it is limited by the fact it has to be in a dragon deck. If we assume that you're playing a deck that has dragons, then you've already met that requirement. So I think whereas I gave Etten a 4-star for having an Ancient of War in your any class, I think I'm going to give this one a 5-star because it's actually a better Ancient of War in any class that can run dragons. Darkmire Moonkin. I think this is a trash card. Just way too expensive. The spell damage being +2 is just not good enough. It's got some good things going on with the fact that it's high health with the +2, so it can stick around. But at that mana point, at that point in the game, it's just I don't think you can deck build around this as much as you would need to. You'd need to deck build around this a lot to make it worth running in your deck. But if you're deck building around this, you really need to be deck building around Malygos instead, because Malygos has the +5 spell damage, which really lets you end game, which is what you've been doing all of that deck building around that kind of a deck for in the first place. That 2 spell damage is not doing enough to give you the end game that you need for the payoff. We're wrapping up here. We've only got a few cards left to go. We've got the Worgen Abomination. This is kind of the new what's the elemental that does 2 damage to everything? It's getting a little hard to remember some of these. But anyways, that's going to have some use at the end of your turn. Deal 2 damage to all other damaged minions. The problem is, of course, they have to be damaged. It's not easy to reliably damage entire boards of minions. It's got some good things, though, because it could be that you can keep your minions more healthy and you can just damage individual minions on their side that you want to see damaged. So, there's some synergies there, but at the end of the day, the damaged part of it is going to be hard to consistently proc. I think it's going to ultimately be a 2-star card. Cauldron Elemental. Your other elementals have +2 attack. At that stage in the game, I don't think we care so much. I'm not going to deck build around the anticipation of having a full board of elementals that just happen to need +2 attack at 8 mana. This isn't a 3 mana roar or anything like that. This 8 mana is just too high to deck build around. So that's a 1-star card for me. Splitting Fester Root. This card is really a fun card, and I really like how sticky it is. 8 mana is a lot to ask, but I really do like how when you plop this down, it's just going to stick and stick and stick. So, it's got some synergy, not synergy. It does actually have some synergy on things that want you to, when you summon a minion, X happens. For example, Darkshire Councilman, but I think that might be rotating out. I'd have to double check. Something like that could help on the fact that it's summoning. Another one that this could work great with is Quest Priest, because you've got the Death Rattle, and Quest Priest just cares that you're summoning Death Rattles. So this one hits the board, and then they kill it. You get 2 more Death Rattle 2/2s, and then you kill it. Those get 4 1/1. So you've got 3 Death Rattle procs and all those minions and all those stats out of it. It's pretty good. This is 12/12 worth of stats all said. So anyway, I think this is an 8-star card. I think that it needs taunt or something in order to be a little bit more threatening for the 8 mana, so it's not a great card. But there are going to be situations that you can deck build into where having that many minions hit the board is going to be really good, and or having that Death Rattle tagline hit the board that many times is going to be very good for you. So a 3 mana Splitting Fester Root. Deranged Doctor. This is interesting. The 8 for an 8/8 is not very good. It doesn't have taunt, but it is restoring 8 health the turn that you play him. I'm sorry, no, that's a Death Rattle. I'm sorry. At Death Rattle, I don't like this card at all, because he's got to die before. Yeah, he's not doing enough on the board. That's a 1-star card for me. Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 2-star card because you could be running certain synergies. 8 on an 8/8 on a control that's really heavy on the taunts. That doesn't really rely on him, and there's some good neutral taunts in this deck, in this expansion. I could see a world where you need to get your high damage amount in there. I'm gonna give him 2 stars, and in that case also the Death Rattle can really come in handy. So I'm gonna give him 2 stars, but it's not generally a good card. I would have liked this a lot more as a battle cry, which I thought it was originally, and I was going to mention it as being a 3-star card. But as a Death Rattle, I don't like it nearly as much, and it's going to be a 2-star card for me. Gilnean Royal Guard is, each turn she swaps her attack and health. One place that she's going to really shine is in a Lady in White deck. By the way, I didn't mention this earlier, but Lady in White will tend to work great with all of the Worgen cards, because all the Worgen cards start with high health, low attack. Lady in White is going to take all of them and make them high health and high attack, equal attack to that health. And the Worgens tend to have some kind of effect in addition to the fact that their health swaps, their stats swap every turn. So, for example, in a Lady in White deck, you can see how strong this would be. You'd get an 8/8 Divine Shield Rush deck, card for 8 mana. So that's enough to take care of your opponent's biggest card, their giant or whatever, not even be damaged. You killed it on the turn you played it, and now you've still got an 8/8 sitting there, on your side of the board, which would be a really strong play. The thing about it is you can't really rely on the Lady in White synergies to give a high rating to a card, but that particular synergy I really do like. I think all in all, the other thing though is you can play this very similar to what I just described every other turn, insofar as you'll get an 8 attack divine shield, meaning that your health won't matter on that turn anyways, and you'll be left over with a minion that they have to deal with that has 8 damage that just dealt with, let's say they're giant, and they still have to deal with it somehow. So they're going to lose some kind of resource in order to deal with this. So, you know, I can see that. And the other thing is, even other times, the traverse version could be decent in certain conditions. I don't think you'd ever play an 8 mana 3 rush divine shield with whatever, so that's not great. But the thing is, even when it's on the bad side of the turns, there's could be situations where you want to run that even. Ultimately, at 8 mana, this is a control style card, so it's not as sensitive to all the stars aligning, because you're already playing this in a deck that is going long, so you can kind of wait for the right turn to get the 8 damage rush. And when you do get the 8 damage rush, it's leaving a really strong body on the floors, on the board. Overall, I'm going to give this a 3-star rating. I think it has some problems, but I also think that it's got some really good high points. And with the Lady in White deck, I think it's really a high point in that particular deck. And the final card of the set, we've got Baku, the Moon Eater. This is a 5-star card. It's a good card to end the review with, because this is just going to enable so many awesome decks. I'm really looking forward to it. Earlier in the review, I said that for even and odds, I gave pretty much usually took a 1-star deduction off of that card for the fact that it's an even odd. You won't be able to curve stone, and you're losing, you know, half of the cards available to you to play that kind of deck build game. But in this case, I think Baku's effect is doing just what you want. You're getting the upgraded hero power from the very beginning of the game, and I think that on turn 2, or let's say even coin on turn 1 and then again on turn 2, getting some of these upgraded hero powers is going to be super strong. Of course, one of the first ones everyone thinks of is tank up. You know, you can tank up twice, you know, to start the game, and you're at +8 health. That's really good, and it's just the beginning of keeping you stable enough to get to the late game to where it doesn't matter about even and odd turns anymore. So that's a really strong example of how this can work. There's Druid, I think, is very similar in that way, and they're going to be able to almost tank up as far as they can get 2 armor, and then get that 2 attack, which gives them a lot of flexibility to actually deal with threats on the board every turn. 2 damage is pretty good to have recurring. And just the fact that this starts at the beginning of the game means that you can really plan around certain synergies. If you're trying to do the paladin, the odd paladin where you're bringing in 2 1/1s every turn, you know, it's good to know that whatever synergies you're trying to work with extra minions, you get access to those from the very start of the game. You don't have to wait until turn 5, let's say, or turn 6. I'm sorry, the old, oh boy, I'm blanking on her name now, but you don't have to wait till a later point in the game to start having access to that hero power, and or you may not even draw that card till the very end of the game, and then it's all worthless. This effect will always give you the chance to reliably use these upgraded hero powers, and I think Baku is going to absolutely define quite a bit of the meta, because I think that there's going to be enough reasons to try to work around his upgraded hero powers. One last one to mention is Odd Mage. Should be really strong. They've already got a lot of Odd Mage support in like Black Hat, or was it Black Cat? Black Cat. And still getting the 2 damage, hero power ping is going to be really useful. So anyway, Baku is going to be great. He's a 5-star for me. And with that, that is my review for this expansion set. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward to playing some Hearthstone when it launches here tomorrow. As I'm recording this, it's going to be launching tomorrow. I'll be seeing you out in the game, and have fun, enjoy the expansion, and I'll talk to you soon.